Yeah, good morning, everybody. With a slight delay, I would like to open today's fourth Veterinary Big Data Stakeholder Forum. It's a hybrid meeting. We've got a few participants here in the room, and when I last checked, there was about 55 people connected online. I hope we will see more today. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you to the fourth edition of the Veterinary Big Data Stakeholder Forum. Fourth meeting means that we actually started this 3 years ago, with every year hopefully progressing a bit further alongst the strategy that we developed in 2021. This is an event that we've been organizing since the Veterinary Big Data program in the European Medicines Regulatory Network has been adopted, as I said, in 2021. And the timing of this event coincides with the midpoint Veterinary Big Data strategy, which was then developed 2022 to 2027. And it's an appropriate point to reflect on what we have achieved until now, and to collaboratively determine what are the opportunities and potential next steps to support veterinary regulatory activities in this fast-changing space of big data. A guiding thought in our detailed and useful discussions today is to remember that technology is the means to achieve the goals of the veterinary stakeholders. So it's not about the technology per se and the fact that we can use big data, but it's about what can it deliver for veterinary stakeholders, both veterinarians in the field, regulators, and marketing authorization holders. So we must always start with the fundamental questions on the why and what of a requirement before we look at the how of a technical solution. And I think AI, artificial intelligence, is one of those tools that we're looking at right now. It was not mentioned when we developed the big data strategy, not to the extent where we see its importance developing right now. And we don't know what the future with artificial intelligence will look like, but we know for sure that it will play a role, whether in the development of veterinary medicines or in monitoring safety or environmental risk assessment, or indeed in the actual assessment of dossiers. The agency has been looking into artificial intelligence and into potential use cases for that, both on the human and the veterinary side. And they easily came up with over 100 potential use cases that could be used in the veterinary domain. So it shows how powerful that tool can be if controlled properly. I think we need to harness it. And I'm probably one of the most critical people in thinking, okay, can we give us over to artificial intelligence? I'm still old-fashioned paper-based guy of person, so it's in my lifetime I will see it developing, but hopefully at a pace that we can control it. So while the data and technology landscape has changed since 2021, the principles of this event remain constant. It's to communicate developments, current themes, and forward-looking trends in the veterinary big data domain, and how we can all benefit from these new technologies. And it's to offer an open forum for discussion with stakeholders on big data use cases, benefits and risks, and also to inspire new use cases and ideas that may exist in the animal health and medicines regulation domain. And I remember when we did the first big data stakeholder meeting, we had to borrow quite a bit from other areas, from the human arena as well, but also looking at specific veterinary use cases. I think nowadays we can be more self-supporting and filling a program and discussing veterinary areas. The transformative potential of big data is readily apparent in our daily lives, and each of us is carrying a phone with more data and computing power that was used to land Apollo 11 on the moon. However, the effective application of this potential to benefit public and animal health is the challenge that we focus today. There's also a downside to it, I would say, and that's interesting that the Apollo 11 mission, which was basically computed on what we would call an AT or an XT computer at the time, nowadays the software and the hardware has become so complex that a lot of these missions would fail because of errors and bugs that you can see in those systems. And there were fewer bugs in the simpler coding that was used for the Apollo 11. And this is why some of the launches that NASA had in recent times have actually failed. And they could not repeat the Apollo 11 simplicity, so to say, with current systems. The knowledge has gone and the hardware has gone as well. So the program of today's events is structured around 2 deep dive sessions driven by stakeholder feedback and topics of interest in the veterinary regulatory domain. First session focuses on veterinary big data, an update on the veterinary big data strategy implementation and findings from the veterinary big data landscape analysis that we announced in previous meetings. And it discusses the emerging theme of federated data spaces. And then in session 2, we will look at the use of AI in both the regulatory network and pharmaceutical industry, discussing the different approaches and risk postures for adopting AI products. And the panel discussion will be wide-ranging on the AI topic, and I invite you all to contribute to that. So over the last 3 years, this forum has provided a platform for free exchange of ideas between multiple stakeholder groups to our mutual benefit. We've put big data on the agenda, and I think AI will follow putting it on the agenda as well in relation to big data. And today, I'm pleased to see representatives from both the pharmaceutical industry, animal healthcare professionals, academia, research institutions, regulatory authorities, and other national and international government bodies present. And we hope that our discussion today will further deepen the cooperation and lines of communication between EU Veterinary Medicines Regulatory Network and its stakeholders on big data and related data-driven technologies. It will help our common goal of driving towards a more data-driven regulatory system. And when I see data-driven, it was always data-driven, but more digital data-driven, obviously. Generate ideas for data-driven projects that will support veterinary regulatory authorities in the short, medium, and long term. And that can be in the areas of new medicines development, pharmacovigilance, environmental risk assessments, and other use cases that we have identified before. So I look forward to hearing today's presentations and active participation from attendees, both online and in the room. And to continue a strong momentum and drive we've built up towards achieving our shared veterinary big data goals. And I would like to now start with session 1. It's my pleasure to introduce the chair of the first session, sitting on my right, Jana Shalansky. Jana holds a BA in Business Administration and Psychology. She joined the European Medicines Agency a long time ago, in 2003, as an assistant in the Veterinary Medicines Division, and you've never left the vet division since, so working in various roles in the division. As of 2016, she was responsible as program manager preparing for an implementation of the VMP regulation. And in 2021, she was appointed head of the newly created Veterinary Strategic Support Office in the Veterinary Medicines Division, providing strategic advice to all levels of the division management, and currently with a special focus of raising awareness about the work of the division and driving forwards the implementation of the veterinary big data strategy and veterinary research initiatives. Jana, I would like to hand over to you. You've got the floor.
Thank you very much, Ivo, and good morning to everybody. I would also like to welcome you to this event and particularly this session. So the veterinary big data latest developments and the way forward. This session means to give insights into the work that the veterinary division and key partners have been doing to implement the veterinary big data strategy that you're all very familiar with now. I'm also looking very much forward to your active participation. The feedback we've received in the previous 3 events has been very valuable in our internal discussions on how to best prioritize big data capabilities in EMA's work. So the title of this session is deliberately chosen to represent the wide range of topics represented in the veterinary big data and the fact that we are on a multi-year implementation journey. So we would like to highlight the elements needed to enable the changes towards implementing a data-driven strategy. So that would include the work on the strategy and the work plan, and at the same time tracking new developments. These are very interesting topics, we think at least, but due to time limitations, some of them could not be on this agenda. But we welcome at all times stakeholder input or questions now and outside this session. One example of engagement on the topic is, of course, the Veterinary Big Data Hub, which is a European Medicines Regulatory Network body group, which regularly meets to discuss the data topics. So who's the session for? I think absolutely everyone. It's especially relevant for the stakeholders involved in the Veterinary Medicine Products Regulation, who are very excited by big data's potential as an enabler in every step in the product lifecycle. I do believe the speakers today share that vision, and the presentations are designed to provide information and spark questions from all of you. And Ivo, just to note, I can see now we have 94 participants online, so it's growing. The Veterinary Big Data Strategy, like all the best strategies, is a dynamic framework defining our goals and the high-level milestones that we were looking to achieve to realize the value in data-driven regulatory capabilities. The framework therefore directs and coordinates our work and basically helps us decide which projects to say yes to, and equally important, which projects to say no to for the time being or for the longer term. The strategy, however, is flexible to respond to changing environments or opportunities. So, for example, the capabilities arising from new technology or the impact of the EU Data Act and the EU AI Act legislations, or responding to EMA's reflection paper on AI. However, the delivery of the strategy's objectives is where the tangible value is realized. The thread that joins all the three presentations today in this session is to cover these veterinary big data topics in the context of delivering objectives and also evaluating new themes. For this, then, we will first hear on the veterinary big data strategy delivery from Paul Damien Lin. As mentioned in the introduction before, we are halfway through the journey in the implementation of the 5 pillars of the strategy, and Paul will cover a deep dive looking back on what we've done in the implementation in the last 12 months and what milestones have been delivered. He will also look forward to what the next 12 months of work will hold. One of the 5 pillars in the data strategy is the veterinary data landscape. So our second speaker, Eva Pacholewicz from the Wageningen University, will give insights into the year-long analysis to find and evaluate real-world data sources. This research to identify both real-world data sources and sources of real-world evidence is foundational work that has been essential for building sophisticated data products that depend on large amounts of good quality representative data. Tracking and evaluating emerging themes in the data domain is a key ongoing task. So our third speaker, Diana Teixeira from Animal Health Europe, will evaluate whether data spaces, a concept for federated data platforms, offer any benefit in the context of veterinary medicines regulation. A key question is, do we have any use cases or problems that can only be solved by the use of a data space? Well, let's see about that. Then, without any further ado, let's introduce the first speaker, Paul Damien Lin. So, a quick recap, because he has been introduced before at times. Paul's academic and work interest in solving complex business problems by the appropriate application of data and technology are absolutely a perfect match for the work needed to implement the veterinary big data strategy. He is also very interested in the full range of potentialities that data-driven capabilities can provide, from automating a simple task to large-scale transformations. So over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Jana. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here to be presenting an update and a deep dive on the Veterinary Big Data strategy. To start with an update on myself, my name's Paul Damien Lynn, and I'm lead data scientist in the VSS team in the EMA. The VSS team, we own strategy, implementation, and coordination of the big data strategy. So now we're going to cover 5 points, starting with an introduction on more on what the VSS team does and how we do it. Moving on to recap on the 5 pillars of veterinary strategy. Next, we have to touch about governance and the interrelated governance bodies in the data space. We'll then speak about how we track and evaluate emerging technology themes for fit for purpose or benefit for our goals. And finally, we'll round off with next steps, looking forward to what the next 12 months hold. I do welcome questions, and we'll cover them at the end of all the sessions. So Ivo, in his introduction, he touched on 3, I think, very powerful questions. Why, what, how? And as a proud father of an inquisitive 5-year-old, I'm very used to having to answer those questions, why, what, and how, on a daily basis. Answering her questions, it's a better analytical training than any business school. She's a very low tolerance for long, waffly, or simply wrong answers. And I echo Jana's comment that the best strategies are ones that have clear, understandable, explainable, and achievable goals. And to help communicate our strategy, we refined this, distilled, in fact, the strategy into one sentence. This is what we want to achieve. It's our North Star. So when it comes to a question on what we want to do or not do, what is the best return on investment for a particular decision, we constantly come back to this question. This is the why of what we're doing. As I mentioned, the VSS team, we own the work in this space, and it's full end-to-end ownership with multiple tasks within the team, from daily data analytics, working in large, long-term change management programs, planning, presenting at conferences. We cover everything from alpha to omega. And this is the what of what we do, and we're always very happy to talk about what we're doing. So what does this mean in practice? We've covered the what and the why. We're going to focus now on the how. And how we structure the work we do is we use 3 themes: optimize, operate, and connect. I'll speak to each of these in turn. So for optimize, we're always looking, we're curious by default, always asking why, can anything be improved? If we can save 5 minutes work, why not? All the way up to large scale programs. And at the center of every decision is veterinary domain business cases. We never lose sight of why we're doing this. We're evaluating new technology, utilizing digital technology, and collaborating as a matter of course. For operate, here we're looking for digital data-led decision-making and providing the tools and the data to inform those decisions as part of implementing the veterinary big data strategy. Some new skills that we're learning, and certainly not everything. We're always looking for automation. A very new theme, and one I'll talk to later in this, is citizen data scientist, realizing new data analytics capabilities to reduce the barrier between users of the data and interacting with the data. And finally, connect. How do we bring people to the data? How do we utilize the capabilities? We can build a lovely new house, but if nobody moves in, maybe we've not realized the full value. And for example, fair data principles to make sure data is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. A very standard industry-wide practice. So now moving on to the 5 pillars of veterinary strategy. To recap, when the veterinary strategy was written, there are 5 key principles: regulatory business case, data literacy, stakeholder engagement, data landscape, and sustainable ecosystem. And these principles were cascaded down to an agreed timeline of implementation. And the actionable work was documented in the detailed Veterinary Big Data work plan that finishes next year. And part of the actions for the coming months is to document the next iteration of the work plan until 2028. The plan is further refined into 3 capability enablers: analytics discoverability, governance and literacy, and stakeholder engagement. Then working backwards, for stakeholder engagement, I think this forum is a perfect example of that. We also have ad hoc events, there's the veterinary newsletter, and stakeholder engagement and two-way communication we see is absolutely vital. The other capabilities, I'll talk in detail on some of the goals we've achieved in the last 12 months. So the first one is capability I'll talk to is governance and literacy. And this is a quote from a professor I studied with on a system dynamics course at MIT. And I think it really sums up the step change in the world we have now. It's why data literacy can no longer be considered optional or a nice to have or only for specialized roles. In a way, we are all now data managers with the responsibilities to evaluate and utilize and be aware of the risks of data. And to that goal, there's a new data literacy training module on the EU NTC platform. And the goal is to introduce how to work with data, to explore, understand, gain insight, absolutely be aware of data traps and data fallacies, but overall to gain value. As you can see, I'm the topic lead, so I heartily recommend this training. It's currently rated as a 5 out of 5, but as this is a data course, I expect someone to ask me how many responses that is. The next capability is analytics discovery. The HMA EMA catalog, it holds indexes for real-world data sources and studies. And the catalog has been updated to now support specific veterinary data elements, and we can soon start uploading data sources to the catalog. For example, the first tranche will come from McGinnigan's data landscape analysis, which Eva will speak to next. However, if there's other data sources that you are aware of, we're always interested in hearing about them. Users can upload data themselves. You need to set up an account, and there are some minimum criteria to upload a catalog. However, we look for this to be one source of documenting available information. Another aspect of analytics discovery is data quality. In the world of data, there are many differing opinions. If you've ever been to a data conference, if there's 5 people in the room, there'll be 10 different opinions. But the utmost importance of data quality is one that everyone can consolidate and agree on. Using the CAN model that was documented in 2016, the UPD data quality framework was built looking at conformance, completeness, plausibility, and assessing data quality in 2 dimensions, verification and validation. The data quality framework has been live for over a year, and we've seen over a 50% improvement in overall UPD data quality. Of course, there are improvements to be made on the existing process, and also to iterate for more sophisticated data quality checks to be put in place. However, this is a great example of an iterative, collaborative work which started small and has delivered value. And I'm very happy that Lara, who leads the data quality framework, is also speaking today. Now we move to governance. In this space, there are several governance fora and interested parties and connections between It's a network by itself. And it's absolutely critical to ensure there's the appropriate veterinary representation and two-way flows of information to align on what the goals are in governance. One key point is always on the top left, we have cross-domain boards of the Big Data Steering Group and EU Data Board, and they're merging. The new group is provisionally called the Network Data Steering Group. It goes live in December this year. There are veterinary representation on this new body from the EMRN, EMA, and veterinary professional bodies. There's also cross-attendance between these fora to ensure that we are aligned. And there are mutual areas of work. So for example, the BDSG published a new EMRN data strategy. Dr. Sandra Bertelt and myself had input to this document from a veterinary perspective, and the document went live for a public consultation actually last Friday. So I'd invite you all to have a look at that. As Jana mentioned, there is a specific body, the Veterinary Big Data Hub, that looks for veterinary specific strategic, objective, and tactical big data and related technology, all within the context of the Veterinary Big Data Hub and also the strategy implementation. This expert group currently has representation from 6 NCAs and the EMA. We meet on a 3-weekly basis and looking in detail at data themes, data issues, and benefits, news items, everything that could impact the veterinary regulatory environment. Moving on now to emerging technology themes. The speed of development in this space is amazingly fast. Sometimes I think you can get overwhelmed with the number of different capabilities, new products. And the core always is, what do we want to achieve? What problem are we trying to solve when we're evaluating a new technology or process? And just 2 of the frameworks we use, I'd like to speak to now, are firstly, the Courtney model. So we use the Courtney model when we're looking at, say, a brand new process, a capability, just to gauge what the level of alignment is, to do the difficult work up front. It runs from level 4, which is nobody has a true idea of what we want to do, there's no alignment, down to level 1, where there's consensus on the direction we can proceed. And we're using this model to evaluate, like, where are we in this? Have we asked all the questions? Is it a solution searching for a problem, for example? So we're only working on what brings benefit. Another useful approach we use are these 3 strategic postures: shape the future, adapt to the future, and reserve the right to play. So shape the future are startups and scale-ups or specialized companies like OpenAI or DeepMind who are leading, creating new products, new business areas. Adapt to the future are the companies that are looking maybe to change, but they aren't leading. They aren't creating. They're buying relatively quickly the products from the shape the future domain. And then finally, they reserve the right to play. And this posture is where we look to see what others are doing. We evaluate where we're engaged and aware. We learn from others' mistakes. We could argue it's last mover advantage, but we reserve the right to play. It's a flexible approach, which says we'll do it if it benefits us. And of those themes, what are we drawing out? So there are many. The 3 key ones we're seeing. Firstly, AI. That's to no surprise to anyone. We'll have a dedicated session in the afternoon, so I'll not speak to this now. Data spaces. Diana will be speaking to that later in this session. And then data self-service capabilities for business users. Self-service analytics. Bringing the user to the data. And this is, I think, one of the most useful developments we've seen. The people who know the data the best, the business users, sometimes have a chain of dependencies to get access to the data. There's finding the data, where's it stored, in what format. There's interpreting the data, preparing and cleansing the data, and then finally visualizing the data. And it could be a use case where I start on Monday with a question that needs some data to support, prove or disprove my hypothesis. And it could take weeks until I've got the data in a format that's usable. So the overall goal of this tooling is to lower the barrier with access to the data. And there are three types of tools within this area. There's the data catalogs, which show where the data is, who the data owner is, gives an estimate of, say, data quality. But it's a centralized place. It's going to one location rather than having to do a shotgun approach to try and find some useful data. There are data preparation tools. So the data preparation, it's not new. It's something someone can do with SQL and a couple of maybe years of experience. However, this experience maybe doesn't exist for all business users. And using a GUI-driven point-and-click tool where you can remove blanks, convert the data into specific standard formats, all within minutes, is a useful capability. And then finally, data visualization. Usually the end of some projects where we can explain and interpret the data in a graphical way. And once again, tools, I won't mention any names of any vendors, but these type of tools have really created a step change in what we can do and what we can offer. Of course, all this comes and does not exist in isolation. We have to have appropriate data quality that we've referred to before. We have to have appropriate training, the data literacy, or training in specific tools. So it's good to look at this as a system which has to be addressed in totality to get value. So finally, on next steps, what does the next 12 months look like? We're focusing on 6 themes here. Starting top left, absolutely our North Star is the implementation of the Veterinary Big Data strategy. The immediate task is working on the next iteration of the Big Data work plan. What are the concrete, achievable objectives and key results that we'll be looking at? We'll be looking to maintain our clear roles and responsibilities, both within EMA and with external stakeholders. We deliver value incrementally and we work agile. This, in our experience, is in this space where there are many, many options, working incrementally in an agile way gives us the flexibility to reinforce success and fail not less successful projects quickly. And for partnerships and communications, we absolutely acknowledge that no one person has all the answers. We must collaborate and communicate to achieve our goals. So to round off, there's some advertising and contact information. Always happy to talk, either now or outside the session. So if you have any emails or email addresses, vet.analytics@ema.europa.eu. And advertising for 2 upcoming events that may be of interest. Firstly, we have the AI multi-stakeholder workshop, which will really go deep dive on the AI topic. That's on November the 5th, and I think registration shut on October the 25th. And then on November the 28th, the EMA HMA Big Data Stakeholder Forum, where there'll also be veterinary representation. Myself and Dr. Bulthart will be speaking there as well. So to round off, thank you very much for your attention, and I'll hand back to Jana.
Thank you very much, Paul. I think we might have a second for one immediate burning question, if there is one. Not in the room, and I don't think there's any questions online either. Okay, then we'll move on. So now I'd like to hand over to Eva, who holds a PhD from Utrecht University Her expertise spans veterinary public health, foodborne zoonosis, and food sciences. She has held various research and development positions in both academia and the industry. In 2018, she joined Wageningen Bioveterinary Research as a scientist, and her current research focuses on investigating risk factors for foodborne pathogens, harmonizing epidemiological and genomic data through a One Health approach, and integrating omics into risk assessment models. She is particularly interested in maximizing the value of existing data to enhance health assurance for both animals and humans. So over to you, Eva.
Thank you. European landscape is beautiful, and many people can agree with that and enjoy traveling across it and visiting diverse countries. I do as well. And today I would like to tell you about one of my recent journey through European landscape. And that was not an ordinary one, because it was a journey through landscape of veterinary data sphere. It was also not an ordinary journey, and not only in the space, but also in time. We were investigating data that we have now and looking into the future, how can we use them to support activities in a regulatory domain. I would like to tell you today about our journey takeoff, about the roadmap, about our journey itself, and about the landscape, destination, and next steps. So we started in Lelystad at Wageningen Bioveterinary Research, where we work on a research question that was from European Medicines Agency to conduct the data landscape analysis. And in our institute, we work on independent research to prevent animal diseases and promote health. We have animal facilities and diverse lab facilities, also those that enable us to work with highly contagious pathogens. In the group of epidemiology where I work, together with my colleagues, we started to approach the research question of landscape analysis, and we realized that we need the support of colleagues from our sister institutes within our organization. And together with colleagues from Wageningen Economic Research and Wageningen Food Safety Research, we went for this journey forward. But why we were doing this? This is because we are moving towards the data-driven authorization, and the reasons for that and why to take actions are listed on this slide. And this project was created for the benefit of stakeholders. And in our research, with our wide expertise, we try to address this project objective in the last years. So what were the objectives of the projects? And these were as follows: to carry out a landscape analysis and identify data sources in animal health that can be used to support key regulatory activities through the life cycle of veterinary medicines. Following that, the objective was to characterize the identified data sources, and based on those identified and characterized data sources, to select a subset of sources and propose a proof of concept. This means to show examples how the data can be used to support regulatory activities. I would like to emphasize here that this work was conducted by Stichting Wageningen Research, and the opinions expressed are those of Stichting Wageningen Research and do not represent the opinion of European Medicines Agency. So to tackle the broad question of landscape analysis, we needed a roadmap. And we prepared it, taking into account a top-down approach. It means that we were searching for many data in veterinary domain that are used and stored, and which can support the activities of a medicines agency. And this approach can support discovery of sources that would not have been considered in the first phase. It is an opposite of a bottom-up approach where investigations start with a concrete research questions and data are searched for that to answer this question. So this is our roadmap, the landscape analysis protocol, which describe criteria, what information we were searching for, what this data, what should be the content of the data we are interested in. We also describe who are the stakeholders where we are going to search for information, and also with what methods we will identify the data sources. Further on, we characterize the sources and synthesize the available information and describe the landscape. So our journey. In 3 countries, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, and in Italy, we were able to have more in-depth insight in data sources because we had local informants there who, following our landscape analysis protocol, were identifying relevant data sources. This was not possible in all European countries due to given time. Therefore, with our methods, we were scanning through the countries across Europe, using our survey and using the literature search approaches. It appeared that using this survey, we harvested 51 eligible data sources, and this was our less successful method in data identification. The most successful survey was the one provided to veterinarians and national authorities, and the least successful was the one distributed to pharmaceutical companies. Using the searches in literature and desktop search, we founded more data sources, 385 sources. However, using the search in peer review publication, we primarily found regulatory data sources. So we wanted to extend the scope in the gray literature, meaning to search for reports, initiatives, websites that could have relevant data sources for our study. This was also subjected to limitation because that kind of information are mostly published in local languages. And of course, we translated our search terms, but it can be that we still have sources that are unidentified. Additional searches were conducted at national level using the help of our informants in Italy, the Netherlands, and in Belgium. And we identified 180 sources in Italy, 50 in Belgium, and 48 in the Netherlands. And interesting here is that although all these partners received the same guidelines how to search for the sources, you can see on the figure that the distribution of from which stakeholders the data come from is different. For example, in Italy, majority of sources came from national authorities, in Belgium from pharmaceutical companies and veterinarians, and in the Netherlands from farmers and animal owners. So it means that relationship with stakeholders influence this data identification. Having the data identified, we work on their characterization, and for this we used 13 metadata items that are listed here. And basically, we wanted to describe the sources in terms of what is the data about, which country does it come from, who owns the data, and for what purposes it is used, and can we access the data. So we started with a broad question on big data landscape, and through our research, we drafted the landscape, gave it a structure, and categorized data sources that we found. In total, we identified 652 data sources, and here you can see their geographical distribution. However, these quantitative findings need to be carefully interpreted because the sources are not weighted, so it can be that there is one source that is extensively used by diverse stakeholders and is counted as one, similarly as a source coming from one single experiment. How does the landscape look like? Here we see a summary of data that we have found. And you can see here that most abundant sources were on disease and product registries, on veterinary drug residue surveillance, on antimicrobial resistance, of health records from veterinary practices, and on pharmacovigilance. Most of the sources originate from public sector, and this suggests that regulatory framework accelerates findability of data sources, and also it supports creation of structured databases, storage of the data entries, and more research that is done in these topics, and also generates a new data. From our landscape, we have seen that half of the sources can be directly accessed, and we have seen that we have identified more sources that were associated with production rather than companion animals. 70% of data sources were either databases or websites or raw data. There are still white spots on our landscape, and mostly they are related to sources that are owned or maintained by private sector stakeholders. These were more difficult for us to identify and access. We anticipated to find more data sources from companion animals. They are also primarily found within private stakeholders. We have limited sources from pharmaceutical, food producing, and insurance companies. And we have also seen that not all of the sources are accessible without restriction, even those that originate from public sector stakeholders. Having data identified and characterized, we move towards next objective of the project, being a proof of concept, elaborating 3 examples on how the data sources could be instrumental to support regulatory activities. The 3 use cases were inspired by the regulatory business use cases described in the Veterinary Big Data strategy. The use cases, which are summarized in the lowest row of the figure, are related to 3 steps of the life cycle, and in the phase of research and development, we proposed an example, a use case related to regulatory area of innovation of medicines, and the case was on setting study designs for drug testing before authorization. In the stage of veterinary medicinal product authorization, we inspired the case by the regulatory area of submission and evaluation, and we propose a case on faster authorization with real-world data upon veterinary emergency. And in the step of post-authorization, we inspired the case with the pharmacovigilance regulatory area and propose a case on detecting side effects in animals. How we elaborated and explored these use cases, and this was as follows. For each of these examples, we prepared a narrative situation describing a regulatory situation and activity, and from our landscape, we selected a subset of data sources that could support these examples. And we discussed this together with representatives of diverse stakeholders, 24 participants who joined our online workshop. And we were discussing how the set of data that we proposed from our landscape could support these cases. During the validation workshop, it occurred that participants were in favor of using these proposed data sources, the real-world data, for the cases of setting study design and detection of side effects, but they were not in favor of using such sources for faster authorization. They stressed that this can only be done when there is a sufficient supportive evidence and confidence in the efficacy and safety of a veterinary medicinal product, which is coming from closely related product. It was interesting also to see that the discussion inspired another example that could be a potential use case in future, which is on linking farm management system with veterinary information systems and antimicrobial use databases. Following the workshop, we were also working on qualitative assessment of selected data sources, which are listed here. We looked at veterinary data collection systems, veterinary practice systems, farm management systems, activity monitoring sensors, scientific literature, diagnostic data, pets apps, social media, insurance claims. And we evaluated them using the dimension as visuals on the figure. These are the data quality dimensions. And we realized that at this moment, not all the data show their full potential, while sources as veterinary data collection systems or veterinary practice systems or farm management system have a higher quality. Data sources from online platforms, social media are full of bias, they are heterogeneous, incomplete, they lack regulatory terminology. However, it is interesting to understand these data sources because maybe we cannot use them at this moment, but in future, thanks to the help of digital technologies, we can overcome the limitations that we see at this moment. What can be done as a next step? We think that it is important to demonstrate and validate the potential of big data sources for regulatory activities and further elaborate on a use case. We advise to work more on a bottom-up approach, starting from a concrete question, which could be one of the cases that we proposed, and from that look for in-depth information and relevant data sources to look at their quality, FAIR principles. Also create an annotation system that help mapping the metadata with relevant ontologies, establish which data entries are needed, and also develop good governance arrangements with the owners of the data. For all of these steps, it's important to engage stakeholders that could support this data identification and accessibility to these data sources. However, we need to realize what are their considerations to go forward. And the most exciting part of any journey are the fellow travelers. And here I would like to thank to all colleagues and experts who, with their knowledge and contributions, helped to shape this landscape of veterinary big data. And I would like to finish this talk and summary of my journey with a point on a horizon, which is a situation where we receive all of the important information for regulatory activities upon one click. However, for this, engagement of stakeholders is crucial to progress. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Eva. Are there any burning immediate questions in the room? Or Rick, please go ahead.
Thank you, Rick Clayton, Animal Health Europe, and apologies for being late. Despite getting up early, I still got here late. Ia, excuse me, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Very interesting. It's always nice to see a presentation that's going through a detailed project. Do you have any more information on why in the workshop people did not want to use the data sources for faster registration? You may have had it on your slide, I may have missed it.
Yes, thank you for the question. That's correct. We noticed that they were not in a favor in the first step, but then in the discussion it arrived that there might be special circumstances that it can be applied. But they stressed that the process of authorization is very strict and this is very hard to fasten it.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think then we will move to our third speaker in this session. So, as mentioned before, this is Diana Teixeira from Animal Health Europe. Diana holds a master's in veterinary medicine, specializing in equine surgery. She gained some international experience in equine hospitals, student association, and as an inspector. Following that period in practice, she moved to Brussels, joining the Federation of Veterinarians of Europe, FVE. Since 2024, Diana has served as the Public Affairs Manager at Animal Health Europe. She has a strong interest in business and advocates for digital transformation in the veterinary sector. So over to you, Diana.
Okay, now yes, thank you so much. And good morning, everyone. Once again, I would like to, of course, start by thank you Jana, but also EMA, and in name of Paul, especially for the invitation to share some of the work that we are doing on digital and data. As some of you know, Animal Health Europe recently created a digital and data strategic group. And for us, having a strategic group means that everyone is involved. So technical and regulatory, public affairs, communications, we team up and we try to explore all the angles from a topic. On the digital and data topic, we try to look at 2 dimensions. We try to look at digital and data for medicines, but also digital and data for animals. In the context of this group, on the 2nd of July, we organized a workshop, and we were exploring a potential data space on animal health and welfare. For that, we invited some other organizations that are already working on that space, but I will come back in more detail for that later. But this is precisely what brings me here. I'm trying to report on what happened in this workshop. It was a very brainstorming-oriented workshop, and that is what I will try to do with you. So be ready, not for me having all the answers, but me having a lot of questions for you. And I will pass to Slido now. If you could go there through the QR code, please. So when you are in, you will see that the first question is if you think about a data space on animal health and welfare as a possibility or even a concept, what are the first words that come to your mind? And we already heard a lot of words, so I guess you have a lot of material from the previous presentations to answer this question. All right, we already have some answers, some other people typing. First one that I'm seeing is overwhelming, indeed. Transparency, it's very important. Understanding, of course, we're here speaking a lot about coordination, engagement of stakeholders, public health, of course, fair, perfect, single data portal, metadata, statistics. UPD, of course, had to come up. Statistics, data aggregation, federated data, prevention, confusion, sharing, big data, of course, access, siloed. Yeah, unfortunately for now. All right, useful. Perfect. Okay, so I think we have a lot of food for thought, and I will just share with you now what we got in our own workshop. If we're in the present, okay, thank you so much, Katarina. Perfect. So basically, we did the same exercise in our workshop, and surprisingly, your answers are a bit different from what we got, but I think that's also nice to see that we were focusing on different things, and probably because we didn't have the same introduction we had today here. But the key words that we had from our participants were mainly focusing on what would be needed. So harmonization, GDPR compliance, interoperability, and coordination. Well, with these ones we got. Then we went on specifics and on data quality. For example, more than FAIR principles, we listened about this new concept that is the Q FAIR principles. So apart from quality, apart from findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, we also add quality to the whole situation of FAIR. Then they also mentioned the need to define the business case or business cases and avoid duplication and building trust. And now if we pass to the context and dig deeper, we have EU and national legislation on data and digital for a long time. Recently, we also had 14 European common data spaces being created. However, if we look at all 14, none of them focus on our industry. For now, we are at the tip, and we still don't have something adapted to our specificities. In other words, something that regards the sector-specific rules, opportunities, and risks. So let's think about it. Could a data space be the next step for us? Answering this question was exactly the purpose of our workshop. We invited other concerned stakeholders, like the Federation of Veterinarians of Europe, regulators and legislators like the European Medicines Agency, the European Commission, as you see, 2 DGs, and you mentioned breaking the silence in your keywords, which I love. That's what we try to do here with bringing 2 DGs together and put them speaking with each other. Then 2 sectors that are already working on their common data spaces. So FPA and CIMA. FPA, as a lot of you for sure know, is the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations. And then CIMA is on the agriculture side, the European Agricultural Machinery Association. And both of them explained the status of their work on the topic. And then we had a discussion followed on what could or could not be done on the animal sector. And as you see here, we have a very complex slide that puts the European health data space in comparison with the common European agriculture data space. In human health, it's an obligatory system, and in agriculture, it's a voluntary system. So starting by that, it's already a big difference. In human health, also financing is significantly higher than for agriculture. Both rely on interoperability, which is the common basis for them to exist. In human sector, they have the interoperability to do 3 things. First, to increase individuals' autonomy and control over their health data. 2, to improve the delivery of healthcare through better primary use of data. And 3, to build a consistent, trustworthy, and efficient setup of secondary use of data. And this can be done for better R&D, innovation, but also policy making. While on the agriculture sector, they have interoperability for another reason. It's for joint use cases. They use a bottom-up approach and they team up according with specific needs only. So as you look at the left, in human health, the focus goes more to the patient and how can health solutions be improved. While on the right, in the agriculture sector, the focus goes more to the simplification and to the complex tasks. This said, a lot of questions need to be answered, of course. At this stage, we are not on level 0, we are actually on level -2, or as Paul was mentioning, is level 4, that is true uncertainty. We would need to know the why, how, who, what, and when. And our participants came up with some questions. But before passing to these questions, I would just focus on the fact that if we think about the human and the agriculture data space, we probably say that human is the most similar to us. But if we look at our sector and we think about only one very simple thing, that is the number of species that we are covering, that's already a huge difference that needs to be addressed. So, as I was saying, a lot of questions need to be answered. We try to report on some of the questions that were asked during our workshop, and not only asked during our roundtable, but asked also when people were recommending some questions or directions to our own data space in case it would be created. So I will let you decide for yourselves whether answering it would be an easy task or not. And in the Slido, I will try to put you answering on these two questions that you see in the top. What is the problem statement to be addressed? And what are the use cases for a data space? You can answer one, you can answer two, as you want. Now we can pass the slide. Well, while you are trying to open it again, maybe this is very obvious, but I will just say it in any case. A use case should be the description of the ways in which a user interacts with a system or a product. And then a problem statement should be a short and clear explanation of an issue or challenge that sums up what you want to change. So, well, you know, our dear Einstein said that if you give 1 hour to work on a problem, you spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 finding solutions. I think we had exactly the contrary problem in our workshop. We spend a lot of time speaking about use cases and not so much time speaking about the problem that needs to be addressed. So I'm very curious about your answers. Okay, so here we are in the problem statement still, or how are we differentiating the answers? A bit confused. Maybe if, yeah, we are not. Okay, so maybe if you can just give a little hint or between brackets what you're answering, if it's the problem statement or use cases. I'm seeing more use cases, but okay. So they should be answering the problem statement only. Okay. Okay, multiple data formats. The problem state, oh, this is going very fast. How to ensure wide and secure access to good quality that is owned by multiple people. That's a very, very good problem statement. Of course it was. Okay, how can we improve animal and public health using data? Problem, what problem? Okay. Clinical studies, that's a use case. Then comprehensive single one-stop shop for animal health data. Validation. Can we go down a bit just to see what was said before, because I kind of miss it? Perfect, thank you. That would be perfect, thank you. Okay, confidentiality of sources. That seems a bit a concern that we need to address, maybe. Less burden of administrative processes, simplification, pharmacovigilance, multiple applications for same data. Meeting unmet needs, okay. Faster registration of new medicines, barriers and motivators for data sharing. Yeah, you can see that it's not an easy answer. I think that's the big problem. And okay, I'm happy to see that we were not the ones in trouble trying to answer this. So maybe if we can pass now to the use cases. So now we're not in the problem statement, we're thinking about use cases. No, it's the same. Yeah, but that's after, yes. I was just trying to make the difference, otherwise I couldn't figure out what was going where. Okay, so now we're in use cases. Support product registration and maintenance, 3 Rs, very good. Understanding unmet needs. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for the identification of use case. Weak signal detection that is only possible by joining multiple data sources. Yes. Pharmacovigilance and outbreak investigation, epidemiological of endemic diseases. IMR, of course, practice, identify trends and issues. Okay, of course, we were also speaking about welfare, and now we are more speaking about health, because remember, we were making the workshop having in mind that we are seeing 2 dimensions. We are seeing for medicines and for animals. So it's not so adapted to EMA work, but still enable common data standards such as quality. Okay, no, I think we had very, very good answers. So I will just pass again to the, if we can, to the presentation. Thank you so much. All right, so many good answers that actually I should put you answering all these questions. But I will not be mean, and I will tell you what we started by doing. And I have a little disclaimer. This is a baby exercise comparing with mapping exercise that Eva and her colleagues did. Actually, not even a baby, it's a fetus exercise, you will see. So we tried to answer one of the, not one, 2 of the sub-questions that you just answered, which were, are there any other easier ways to solve the problem? And why can it be solved through individual databases? For that, we tried to make this mapping exercise to see what was out there. And this is what we found, not the 652 data sources, but I think it's still nice to see what could be related or not. And it's very compliant with the problem, both what we found and what I think Eva found, which is in the animal sector, we have exactly the same issue as the human and the agriculture sector. We like interoperability. And now I would like to come back to Slido again, and the technical ladies will just kill me in a second, but I promise it's the last one. And I would like to ask you, can this be solved through individual data spaces, and how? Not individual data spaces, sorry, individual data bases. Without the need to create a data space. That's an answer. All right, so we have the first answer. It's good, but having a one-stop shop will make things faster, efficient, and less prone to errors. Okay, it's a yes, but no thank you. Support and work with what is already there. Don't reinvent the wheel. Okay, that's a very fair point. We definitely don't want to ignore what is done already. Yes, but only with standards, control terminology is very important. And in our first word cloud, it was very, very emphasized, these terminologies and harmonization. Yeah, no, because data are not harmonized. Again, the same question. There are a lot of challenges. Some aspects could be depending on data access and the question you are trying to answer. Yeah. No single data sources, silos. There are too many governance issues. Yes, we see a lot of yes and no, and yes and no. This is very exciting. Yes, but with a possibility to link and align data. yes, but somehow would need to pull the data together from selected databases. The UPD has the potential to address certain issues that is already standardized. Okay. The person that wrote this will love what we have to say next. Provided a minimum of harmonization of governance, while the data volumes may not be comparable to the human domain. Yes. Oh God, yes. The same challenge of identifying, ingesting, and managing fragmented data sources remains rather than being tech solution focused. One question is what use cases are not served by today's tech? Yeah, that's exactly the difficult question to answer. That's why this is the level 4. Okay, as long as data are isolated and limited geographically, insights would be directional only and may not be enough to support regulatory decision making. Yeah. All right, so I think there is some alignment on this yes and no. There is some skepticism, but also we see that a lot of challenges need to be addressed before we go there. So if I can come back to the presentation one last time. Sorry for that. All right. Oh, not here yet. Again, I think we have a lot of different potential data sources, but limited or no interoperability and availability of EU-wide data, which is also a problem. And it's a problem that really reflects on our communications and public affairs work, not only on the regulatory side, because everything seems to be or global or in other parts of the globe, and then we cannot really take conclusions that are specific for us. So the main outcome of our workshop on a data space on animal health and welfare was that the journey is a very insightful one. The world of digital and data is fascinating. And as stated in number 1, we are still in the stage of assessing possibilities. And that's why in number 2, we find it so important to be part of any conversations on this topic. And of course, we are very interested in doing so. But in conclusion, on the dimension of data and digital for medicines, the only thing we are absolutely sure is that we would like EMA to continue focusing on the already existing initiatives like the ultravigilance and the UPD. So this is all for me.
Thank you very much, Diana. Okay, so we've had 3 very interesting presentations for sure. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I'd like to start with the questions now. There are so many ways to ask a question in this meeting. So first of all, everybody in the room obviously can just raise their hand and I will try to see them. In the WebEx, you can raise your hand and then you will be unmuted when it's your turn. You can also just put your question into the chat in WebEx if you have one. And finally, you can use the Q&A and Slido that you probably still have open to answer to ask any questions you might have. So let's start and see whether we can see some questions. Actually, Ivo would like to start us off, so please go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Jana, and thank you to all the presenters for giving their presentations. Actually, this is what we started out to do when we commissioned the study for the Vet Big Data landscape. It was getting an understanding of what it is, and thank you, Diana, for also bringing that to the table. There is this problem with the accessibility of those data, and I understand that ideally we would like to have everything in one big pot and that we can ask questions, that would be it. But for me, big data means that you pick from different pots and then connect them and then try to do your analysis as well. So that's where you'd have. European health data space, as an example, as you said, it's mandatory. It's more top-down. Even there, it's not guaranteed that you can link all these different data spaces and get the answers out of there. Plus, getting access to the individual data spaces is really difficult. They're looking at very intricate systems, and they need to be managed. And this is where my big issue is at this moment, is in the absence of, let's say, a comparable system like the European Health Data Space, which is triggered by the Commission and by the member states, based on a need that was identified for human health. If we decide that we need something comparable, and we know there's a lot of data out there, how do we plan to manage that part if there's no money, there's resources involved? It's too easy to say EMA should do that. We can make UPD the central hub for that, but that's not going to work because it's not within our mandate. And we've always been focusing at how can we make it more usable, stable by providing a minimal viable product and gradually expand on that. I'm not saying that 10 years from now that will not be the case, but I think the questions that arise now, we cannot answer in that way. So for me, when you asked about the problem statement, I didn't see it popping up, but the real problem statement is who is going to manage this, and how can we provide access to access was mentioned. How can we provide access to people that do have those questions, and make sure that they can ask the right questions and that they can use the data sources available at the time. But for me, the biggest thing is management. So I would like to get an understanding of how that voluntary data space, agricultural data space, is working, because apparently that was triggered bottom up. Is it being funded by a project from the European Union or by the sector? Or because I think that's essential if we really want to progress along these lines. We know the data is out there. We all realize that it can be very usable data. How are we going to bring the next step to this? Over. Sorry for my lengthy question.
Is this turned on? Yes, perfect. I have a problem with this mic for sure. No, but basically this is a very interesting topic that we literally dig deeper with CIMA, and you can also see in the PowerPoint the difference between the billions that are going to the European health data space and the millions, already say something, to the agriculture data space. But in the agriculture data space, what they are doing is allocating 8 million for direction and 16 for deployments. So basically they did a project. It's kind of one of the standards that the European Commission has. And in the first call, they investigate the pathways that will lead to this data space. This is done. This ended in April already. So it was a 18-month process that they were discussing how to get there. And now they have the second call, which is a mixed financing. So they only have 50% support, and then it's membership-based. So there is also industry financing here. And basically they have the implementation part being studied here, the platform, the rules. They will be 3 years in this process trying to understand how exactly this goes forward and how, general how. So yeah, I would say that it's a very important part, and that's exactly why we clearly stated that we don't want EMA to be deviating resources for this. Especially because the source of this, as you said from the beginning, was the European Commission, and the financing is also coming from the European Commission, and also the implementation. So yeah, I think it's, again, we are very much in the level -2 still, with a lot of questions in our head. But it's good to look at how people went there already and to compare examples at least.
Thank you very much. Yes, Alistair, please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone for some really, really thought-provoking presentations this morning. I think I'm leaving with 10 times more questions than I arrived with. But I've tried in my own mind to kind of distill them into two questions that I'd be interested in your opinion about. The first is, it seems to me that whilst everybody can see the potential for value, there's huge complexity here. And the second is that if we look across the range of stakeholders, if you take it one extreme, we might think about animal owners and veterinarians, and at another extreme, we can think about national or European level institutions, companies, etc. And it seems to me there might be two things we can think about. One is the culture. What is the culture that encourages people to engage in data sharing at those different levels? And there will be different things across that spectrum. And secondly, going back to that word of value, how do we deliver value back to the providers of the data as well as the ultimate users of the data? I don't have any answers, but I'd be fascinated to know if you have any insights into that area. Thank you.
I think I'd like to pass that one to Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely recognise what you're saying, Alistair, and the two points, like what is the culture and how to provide value is absolutely key. How do you build that network effect where it's a virtuous cycle where people willingly participate? And I think there's a number of different factors around that, and I'll probably not touch on them all in my answer, but I'll certainly try. The first is the confidence that there is a benefit of it. We see very much trends of people discovering that buried in the 15th page of terms and conditions, your data is being monetized. And that, I think, the transparency and the clear flow of value is key. And then building the culture, I think that is a long journey. There's no other way. I've heard of a very good analogy of trust arrives on foot and leaves on horseback. So I think that is some that we could use to maybe indicate the amount of effort that would be taken in this. When it comes to the complexity, once again, we're dealing with a very complex environment, multiple species, multiple countries, multiple jurisdictions. It would take an approach that I would suggest is going back to first principles of like, what is a problem we're trying to solve? From what I see now, I don't believe that a fully fledged data space is needed to solve this particular problem. There are ways of sharing data that don't require a data space on a technology basis. However, the governance, this is where I don't think you can reduce or take a shortcut when it comes to the governance. And that's documenting like what data it is, who are the data owners, what are the shareable or potentially sensitive data elements. I think one advantage that we do have is when it comes to aligning with some regulations like GDPR or EU PDR, veterinary data sets don't have the same level of PII or personally identifiable information. So I'd see that as an advantage where we can use data, but there always will be a PII. The data owner will be a human, for example. So it can't be assured free for all. Then the other point, and I think it was mentioned on Slido a few times, was on the data standardization and making a value. Person X can upload their data set that could be in Irish with Irish terminology. Person B could upload their set in a different language with different terminology. And anyone who's worked in a data project will say that the 80-20 rule is very consistent when it comes to data preparation, absolutely 80%, if not more. And then the actual analytics is 20%. So getting to the point where we're agreed on what are the data standards, there are different data models that we could use. Then you have to agree which data model. Getting that consensus, I think, will take time. So while not to say that this can never be achieved, I'd say we need to go to first principles, like really back to what problem are we solving? How How are we going to solve it? How will we phase this, knowing that it cannot be a big bang as well? So building culture, you have to demonstrate the value, how to provide value with this range of stakeholders, as you suggested, Alistair, from pet owners all the way up to EU institutions. That will be a multi-dimensional explanation as well. I am very aware that all I'm raising now is challenges, but I do see that the sharing of data, and as mentioned on the Slido, if we share data in a controlled and governed way that respects the various data rules, that can only be advantageous for multiple different regulatory use cases.
Thank you. And maybe Diana wants to add something?
Yes, one of the things that indeed we were advised by the human sector as in a perspective and in a way like a challenge, but in another way like an opportunity, is that one of the biggest challenges they had was it was too late to harmonize whatever they had. They had already too many data sources, they had already too established systems. And we are in a very different point. So if you go to a vet clinic, most of the I wouldn't say most of the vets, but some vets are still making their consultations notes in paper. So these people will have to transition to digital, right? Why not to ensure harmonization now? Is that an opportunity or not? Maybe we are thinking too ahead and we're already thinking about going to the data space, but maybe in the phase that we should be thinking about harmonization as a project and not so much the data space. So we don't need to do everything at once. Maybe the question here is our problem statement compatible with a data space, or is our problem statement compatible with something else? And is that something else harmonization? If it is, what should we do about harmonization? What can we do?
I absolutely agree, Diana. And yeah, just to add to that, that's I think where the key focus should be. What are we trying to achieve here? And I think one of the consensuses that I'm hearing is sharing of data is a good thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be on a data space. There are enablers, such as, say, the data catalog, where you can start finding the data and then request access to the data. So what I'd say is harmonization is absolutely key in order to make data useful. But wholesale harmonization is such a long and hard task that it may not be achievable in a measurable term. So it should be use case driven. We focus on what the problems we want to solve, then find the data, and then start, say, as an ink blot spreads in water. As we harmonize data on the use case driven, we start building up the overall picture.
Alistair.
Yeah, thanks very much, and sorry for hogging the mic. Just a very quick, if you like, personal reflection on your comment about veterinary practice data. In my personal experience talking to providers of these systems to veterinary practices and to practices that they're using them, their motivation for doing so isn't a clinical motivation, it's a business motivation. It's about managing their business more efficiently. And again, in my own personal anecdotal experience with this, practices, large practices even, find it difficult to be able to use their own data for any kind of insight into, for example, the success of treatments, etc., never mind being able to share it with somebody else. So I go back to what you said, Diana, which is absolutely correct. The potential may be enormous, but the chasm between where we are today and the realization of that potential is still enormous as well. And how we cross that, as you say, Paul, has a whole multiplicity of reasons within it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank God we have Paul to sort all that out for us. Yeah. So I'd like to give maybe Kat next. So if somebody could unmute Kat Sterling, and please go ahead. We can't hear you, Kat. Sorry.
I think you can unmute yourself, Kat. You're not muted. Did you connect your audio?
Back. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Sorry. I was actually going to start by touching on Ivo's initial question about funding, and it's something we did talk about a lot, in the fact that the funding drivers are very different in the veterinary sector, and what you guys have just touched on in terms of complexity means that it's not simple, the drivers. And you saw in Diana's word cloud, one of the big things that came out from a Animal Health Europe side of things was business case. And business case is very similar to what, discussion about use cases. And I think the reality is that the industry are not to the point where the use case, the business case is there to support doing something similar to what's being done in human health right now. Although I think we will all watch that very carefully and with interest to see how that evolves and how that works. But I think what we will see happen slowly is these individual use case or project-based examples, whether they are driven by an individual company or collaboratively within industry with a use case, or the regulatory agencies or other funding bodies, where there is specific funding, a little bit like what's happening in the agriculture space, towards a specific project or a specific outcome with a specific question or driver, whether that's a business case or something else. So, for example, that I saw 3Rs came up quite a lot in some of those use cases, and there's a new project that's just kicking off now called VIX 3Rs, which is about virtual control groups, and that's an example of bringing together through public-private partnerships large quantities of data and data analysis that allows insights into whether or not it's possible to create and use virtual control groups. So I think that's what we will see happen, either those type of public-private partnerships or individual companies choosing to seek funding or invest in data sources and data access to answer questions, whether those are questions around helping us understand our markets, unmet needs better, or understanding our products or supporting regulatory decision making. But I think we have to keep in mind here that the questions can be very different. Some of what we're trying to understand is the market, the business, what's needed in the market, or just simple population information is often very difficult to find across different animal species. And just simple things like that can help us have enough data that supports, for example, whether something is a limited market or could be justified as a limited market. There's a huge number of possibilities where we need data, but I think it will be initially very use case, business case driven, and it will slowly evolve. And we may get to the point down the line where there is a business case for an animal health data space, but I think we're a long way from that right now. But there is so much potential there, but I definitely think it will be use case driven. And I think Alistair touched on, the need for the value to be there all across the chain. So those providing the data, those of us using the data, and then those in the middle who are understanding the data, particularly at the regulatory authorities, and whether we have sufficient data that gives us confidence to support regulatory decision making. Because that's one thing, as we've explored more and more real world data sources and everything else, it depends very much what you're trying to do with the data. Do you need to have enough data where you have confidence to make a regulatory decision based on it, or are you looking for sufficient data that give you directional information to make business decisions, for example? So we have a wide variety of questions and use cases we may be trying to answer.
Thank you very much. Rick, please.
Thank you. And I'd like to build a little bit on what Kat was mentioning there. But first, I'm still a bit transfixed by your workshop because on reflection, I worried that it was the wrong question. You were talking about a route to faster registration. And the answer was that, well, it's a very strict process and it's difficult to speed it up. But I'd like to know who was in that workshop giving that response, because that's quite important. But for me, it's not about speeding up the registration process, it's about supporting it. And as Kat just said, are we looking to use data to make regulatory decisions, or as directional data, as Kat phrased it? In other words, supporting the registration. And you'll have seen, I was interested in hesitancy that you picked up in that workshop, because as you all have seen from Diana's presentation in the workshop we did, we also picked up hesitancy because so you don't see us jumping up and down demanding an animal health data space just yet. And that's because there is concern about transparency of decision making. So if you put in a marketing authorization application, you know the data, you're in control of the data, and you submit the data. If somebody else is going and searching other data and making decisions around that, you have no idea what's going on and no influence over the direction the application is going. But in supporting a marketing authorization, an applicant can collect data and have it supporting data within their dossier, then they know what the decision is based on because they've provided the data. So who was in your workshop?
Thank you for the question. Thank you that you raised this hesitancy, because that was important, also part of this workshop. And important is to add here that indeed this real-world data are not to replace the current system, but just to support it. And maybe by some of these workshop participants was taken otherwise. We want to have extra data to support the current way of working. I cannot mention all names of those who participated in the workshop. There were diverse representatives from industry, authorities, and also academia. I don't know where it exactly came from, so I would leave it at the workshop. And I think in general, my observation is that not all stakeholders are ready for this additional support of this additional data. And I think what is missing is really a tangible example showing indeed how the process supported by the additional data could look like as compared to the traditional or current way of working. And I think that this would also show this benefits, what's in this for me, from every stakeholders could see what's added value is in this support of additional data sources. And I think this could also change a bit of mind of those who are not yet convinced in this transformation, and would also support the way stakeholders are talking about the data, what they have, and hopefully share them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Ivo, would you like to add something?
Yeah, no, maybe to respond to that, because I can see reluctance on both sides, both with regulators and marketing authorization holders. But I think we need to realize that, and we're not suggesting that that the use of digital data and looking at real-world data, real-world evidence should bypass anything that's being submitted in a marketing application, authorization application. But real-world data and real-world evidence will become more and more important even after a marketing authorization has been granted, particularly for novel therapies, where when you authorize them, you've only done the experiment, very small groups, and you will not have all the data readily available. We know those situations. Also, areas like antimicrobial resistance. Coming back to your question, Alice, there on who benefits and how can we bring benefit back to the people that submit the data. I think that's an area where we should certainly look at, but there's opportunities there. I think it's a learning exercise. We started this, thinking about it only 3.5 years ago in the veterinary area as regulators. I don't know whether it's been a topic with industry for longer. Certainly in management of livestock, it's been around for longer, and I think that's where we were inspired by the large amounts of data that they were collecting, and we said, "Oh, is there anything that we can collect to use of medicines in livestock, for example?" So it will become more and more a reality. Currently, we don't have a legal basis to replace whatever is being submitted by the companies in their data package on quality, safety, and efficacy with data that we obtain elsewhere in whatever way. And I think we're still a long way away from that. So I don't share that concern. Where I can see a concern, and that's we not too long ago we had a meeting with industry where we were, and this was livestock industry, where we were inquiring about their reluctance to submit pharmacovigilance data, and the reluctance comes from indeed not having a transparent process there, and where they say if we report safety issues or even report lack of efficacy, it could lead to those products disappearing from the market. That's the fear that they have. Now, that means that we have to socialize more why we need those data, what we do with those data, and how it will bring benefit to them if we provide feedback on those data to the whole industry. I think those are areas that we can learn from and where we need to improve. And whether that's through the traditional pharmacovigilance reporting or in different ways of monitoring, same for environmental risk assessment, same for AMR. I think that's things that we would like to find out, learn from, and hopefully prepare for a future where we have a responsible use of those data and they can support responsible regulatory decisions. Over.
Okay, I'm back to Rick.
Yes, just to continue the conversation. So I expressed a concern around regulatory decisions, but I want to be very clear. We are very positive about the possibilities in this area, and we most definitely want to be involved in the conversation. That goes without saying. There are some very clear business cases, and you mentioned perhaps the two biggest, AMR and pharmacovigilance. And I've been very interested in this conversation because Paul has started, well, I don't know whether you've been tacking slightly, but I hear now a more of a focus on having some joined up databases without necessarily going to a full animal health data space, certainly not yet. And that's the way I see these first very specific business cases being tackled, because you only need a few databases to approach those two very clear specific business cases. So, we are very encouraged, but as Diana said, we are quite a high level of uncertainty at the moment.
We have a high level of uncertainty as well, Rick. So, I mean, it has to be accepted by the regulators in Europe and worldwide. We know that FDA has a paper out, a guidance on how to use real-world data, real-world evidence. We don't have anything comparable in Europe. I think we should develop that for sure. There's other use cases. You remember the question we had at TOPRA just 2 weeks ago on field trials. I think field trials is another area where we know about the limitations if you do them for a marketing authorization application. But certainly once medicines are used in fields, and not only vaccines, is where you can collect data on how efficacious they are and how efficient they are and how they fit in and can complement other treatments and animal husbandry systems. So that's the connection I would like to make very much. Not everything is suitable in every circumstances, and I think it may help us in fine-tuning the use of veterinary medicines, both for farmed livestock, but as well as for companion animals. But that's in the future, so still a dream. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, this is definitely developing into a very nice discussion, but I don't want to forget the people online, of course, who have submitted some questions. So the first one was from Holger Ebert. Is a collection of all data sources available? It might help to better understand the complexity and potential solutions. And I think I'm going to just pass that to Paul.
Thank you, Anna. So the short answer, I guess the answer is what data sources are we referring to? When it comes to, say, veterinary product data, well, obviously we've got UPD, other veterinary data assets, UPHV and ASU as well. But I think that one thing I'm taking from your question is basically abstracting away from the system. What's the complexity of, say, merging or standardizing the data? It's not an easy question, and certainly not a straightforward answer. It's a use case driven. Firstly, we would have specific data sources that meet certain use cases, and antimicrobial usage, for example. But when it comes to sort of looking horizontally across data, that would have to be addressed case by case. I think one given that I would be confident saying is it will be complex.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe that question and Holger Ebert can absolutely raise his hand and be unmuted to clarify if he wants. My understanding of the question was maybe towards also what the outcome of Eva's project was and whether that will become available. So just in case that was the question, do you want to answer that as well?
And apologies for any misunderstanding if that is the case. So yes, absolutely. One of the firm outputs from the study was the 652 data sources, data assets. How we're taking this forward is an internal review on the EMA, on the metadata, the population, the coverage of the data sources. And where it adds value, yeah, we'll absolutely be publishing that on the HMA EMA catalogue that is publicly available. And or actually, should add, this is only the starter. There will be additional data sources continuing to be added. So it's an ongoing journey.
Okay, perfect. Then I think I'm just going to pick that 1 second. The comment actually from Alan Radford from Liverpool University that in the slide data just for medicine can create silos and misses out on the huge potential for the same or slightly expanded data set to also address important questions on animal health, and his encouragement to get this right the first time or the data will not be shared. Is there anybody who would like to comment on this? Yes, Diana, please.
I think this comes very much into the keyword overwhelming. Yes, I personally agree it's a one-shot chance. And I think I agree more and more with this every time that I look at this topic, because it's a lot to do, but it's a lot to do right. It's not only a lot to do. So or we do this right or it doesn't work. And that's a lot of burden. And then we don't have the right resources to do it right. So that's a big problem. And then if we speak about a big challenge that we still didn't today, that is the amount of energy that goes to save all this data. That's a big one because we are in an era, let's say, that we're speaking a lot about environments. And if we are creating this harmonization or at least interoperability, and we are inputting a lot of data, but it's not the right way, or we don't build enough trust, or it's not the right problem that we're tackling, then we are just actually polluting. And this is something that people don't usually remember, but it's very important in the political setting that we're living. So yeah, I would say very important comment. And yeah, it's very difficult to reach here a solution, and that's why we are putting so many questions to make sure everything is answered before the step.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm not sure, Kat, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I was just going to add
Thank
to that, Sylvia, so you guys can still hear me. Alan's absolutely right. So it's absolutely critical. data access. And it's true that the value for industry is much broader than just specific information on medicines. It can be across understanding animal populations, animal health generally, pharmacovigilance, use of medicine, supporting our medicines in the field. There's a huge number of areas that are important. I think what we would say as an industry is, while, as we've said, we're maybe not to the point where we think we're ready for something similar to what we have in human health, so the publicly funded European health data space, I think where there are any discussions on an individual basis about data spaces, data access, what's critical is that all the stakeholders are involved from the start, and that any of the outcomes from any of these large projects, anything else, have an ultimate outcome focus on availability of that data and access to that data. Because as we build that in different data sources, different projects that result in data sources, access to that information can be absolutely critical, whether that is disease surveillance information linked to One Health and monitoring outbreaks, whether that's environmental monitoring data, whether you think about the discussions now moving towards one substance, one assessment for chemicals data and assessment and access to the information. The value of that data and the use of that data will only grow with its public accessibility and availability. And I think we all have to keep that in mind if we're involved in any of those projects, around making sure that, as Alan notes, that we think about that from the start of these projects and how that data could be shared, would be shared, what that access may look like, and how to manage that, keeping in mind also things like data privacy, GDPR, and everything else that goes with it. So it's something critical that we think about with any of these projects from the outset, that in the future, ensuring that there will be access to that type of information, and the data is structured in a way that makes it accessible and interoperable. I think depends on what you're trying to do with the data. Interoperable is important if you think about what we're doing in human health, medical information, health records. It's less important if you're not going to have interoperability between data on chemicals and data on animal health disease surveillance, for example, to give you an extreme example. So not everything needs to be interoperable, but it's important that the things that have value are.
Thank you very much. We are running over slightly already, so I will just take one more question, and maybe the other ones, if we have time in the afternoon, we can also address them then. So the one I'm going to pick is the generation of synthetic data and false information raises concerns about their potential integration with real databases. What strategies can be implemented to address this issue? And I believe Paul wants to take this.
I think this is an excellent and very relevant question. So with advances in AI and other technologies, what was previously relatively easy to identify synthetic data, you could run some statistical checks, check for a disproportionate number of the characters or disproportionate number of distribution or a suspicious overall spread of data. It's actually quite hard to do now. This synthetically generated data from some AI companies is almost indistinguishable. And that, absolutely agree, it is a concern. It can have inherent biases. It absolutely amplifies inherent biases as well. So what strategies can be implemented? There is no single strategy. I'd suggest and look to multiple strategies. So firstly, control around who is submitting data. When it comes to submitting data, a process I've seen working successfully in other areas is only specific people are allowed to actually submit, like to have the read-write access. And those people understand the issues and are accountable if there is some synthetic data leaking into the system. The other is, whilst modern synthetic data is almost indistinguishable, almost is the keyword there, we can still look to try and track it. Obviously, some of the tools used are themselves have to be evaluated. There was an interesting result where the US Declaration of Independence was rated 97% AI generated in one of the tools. But in this instance, you adopt a risk posture. Are you tending towards false positives or false negatives? The third is longitudinal time series tracking. We can start getting an idea of what data is uploaded. Obviously, there will be outliers, but if, say, a data value uploaded is somehow 150% outside the last largest value, maybe that's suspicious. And overall, I think this lines into the area of sort of control and governance of data. It's almost another task, potentially another role, in order to track this. But yeah, thank you for raising this question. It is a very real issue. I didn't use real as a joke there.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that brings us to the end of this session. Let me just check with my colleagues. Is there any particular housekeeping for the break?
Everyone, please reconnect at 1 o'clock.
Okay, so there we have it. Thank you very much for the very interesting discussion. And indeed, we have some questions still outstanding from this session, which we'll see if we can address them later. So thank you very much, and see you again at 1 o'clock. Thanks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back from lunch. We're ready now to start session 2, which is focused on artificial intelligence in veterinary medicines regulation. We're going to start with a few multiple choice questions in Slido, and thank you all who's already starting. And this is a non-scientific way of gauging what AI usage is happening now. So we have 3 questions, and we'll take about 30 seconds just to go through these 3 questions and have a quick evaluation at the end. One thing I think we can already see in the results is it's probably exactly as we expected. People are using AI tools sometimes, but one thing that'd be interesting to maybe explore further is to what extent is that sometimes? Is it an evaluation on a recommendation? Is it actual ongoing usage and making it part of someone's daily work? Or is it, I've done it once and I'll never do it again? But this is certainly what I'd expect. And then if we could move into the next question, please. And in this question, I think, again, given the overall themes and trends we're seeing, certainly more than 50% yes is what I'm betting. I hope I'm right. But the permeation of AI is so ubiquitous that every organization I've certainly come in contact with is using AI to some extent, potentially even utilizing AI tools behind the front end that we're interacting with. And then if we could move on to the final question, please. And then the final question is more moving into the tangible. So the first 2 questions, definitely aligning with what I think as a group we would all be expecting to see. We are using AI tools in our daily work sometimes. Our organization evaluating the use of AI tools, more than 50%. And then I think this is a key question, moving from the what if and the potential to backing up that with funding and resources. Resources are always limited. So a commitment to resources suggests to me that this is a more interesting topic, or it's seen to have greater value. But thank you for these responses. Hopefully that refreshed and energized us all after a nice lunch. So we now have 3 excellent and thought-leading presentations from the EMA, who will speak about artificial intelligence at the EMA and use cases, from the EMRN, where the AEMPS will speak about artificial intelligence tools in the regulatory domain, and from industry, speaking on industry use cases of artificial intelligence in the life cycle of veterinary medicines. A panel discussion will follow, and the speakers will also be partaking in the panel discussion. So please prepare your questions for them. The speakers will be talking on the use and potential uses of AI. However, one point that will be clear from the presentations in the first session, and the point that I always focus on as a first instance, is understanding the problem to be solved and defining the business case. And this should always be the first consideration when looking at potential tooling solutions. As stated in the Veterinary Big Data strategy, without good quality, organized data, successfully building sophisticated data-driven tooling is almost impossible. So potential question could be at the outset is there sufficient data for training a particular model? We are all aware of the rapid changes in the space. ChatGPT 3.5 was launched in late 2022. It was trained on around 1.7 billion parameters. Less than 2 years later, ChatGPT 4.0 is estimated to be trained on about 1.76 trillion parameters. A quick scan of news sources provides clear evidence of AI adoption in nearly every industry. Given this paradigm shift, the need to be informed and engaged on developments and risks and issues on AI use case across the entire business lifecycle is clear, even if we adopt or reserve the right to play posture. The AI domain is multifaceted and encompasses so much more than the headline-grabbing LLMs. Other AI capabilities, such as SLMs, small language models, image and sound generation, discriminative AI and machine learning capabilities, also are worthy of consideration and examination. There is increasing legislation, including the EU AI Act, and in America, the Executive Order on the Safe, Secure, and Trustworthy Development and Use of AI. On the actual usage side, we're all aware that using AI entails certainly more than simply installing a package and using it. The supporting needs of sufficient amounts of representative data for training and testing. There are environmental concerns of the energy consumption involved in training and developing and deploying AI models, and the critical need to meet legal obligations and ethical considerations. All these need to be addressed to get to a usable product. I'm very excited to kick off the session that will cover these points and look forward to the panel discussion at the end. Our first talk now is Artificial Intelligence Use at EMA, with two EMA colleagues speaking. The speakers are Luis Pinheiro, who is a senior epidemiology expert at the European Medicines Agency in the real-world evidence workstream of the Data Analytics and Methods Task Force. He is a co-lead in the guidance, policy, and product support stream of the multi-annual AI work plan. The EMA scientific co-lead of the special interest area on data science and AI of the European Specialized Expert Community. He also coordinates the Health Data Lab. And Laura Romero. Laura holds a bachelor's degree in biology and 2 master's degrees in biomedical and clinical research, with a special focus on immunological research and data analysis. She joined EMA's Veterinary Strategic Support Office in 2022 to work on the implementation of the Union Product Database Data Quality Framework. Currently, she works as a veterinary data analyst, providing support on different data analytics activities, digital innovation, project management, and research coordination. She is a member of the EU Veterinary Big Data team, working on the development of the European Veterinary Big Data strategy as the UPD Data Quality Framework project lead. Over to you, Luis and Laura.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks a lot for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation. Hopefully, I can move the slides with this thing. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so in the next 10 minutes or so of our 20-minute duet, I will walk you through a little bit of a journey in terms of what approach the European Medicines Agency had in terms of using AI and innovation to improve the public and animal health. Now, the first thing I think is important to recognize is the AI promise across the medicine lifecycle. This slide is probably 3 years old, 2-3 years old, and now it gets to a point where I need to move the word promise and put it into something a bit more factual. But at the time, we talked about the promise, and the promise, I divided it into 4 bits. You'll see different presentations, different publications that would sort of divided into different approaches. But to me, it was about greater efficiency and productivity, and that's about automating processes, addressing scalability issues, and leveraging personal assistants, such as ChatGPT and similar tools, so these chatbots, and essentially do more things faster. On the other hand, it was about reducing error, and that was getting access to information in a more facilitated manner and reducing the human cognitive load. So having a little bit less, so summarizing and being able to see the full information without cognitive overload. And that's about providing the information at the fingertip of the user. A big chunk of what we see actually happening nowadays is exposing data. So transforming text data into structured data. As you can imagine, regulatory authorities do produce a lot of text data, and that is certainly one of the key elements in our activities, is transforming text data into that structured information. But also reducing dimensionality of data. So now we have big data. This is a big data forum we're talking about. We have things like 10,000, 30,000 covariates in analyses, and trying to make sense of it, even if you have full interpretability, is difficult. And quite often we need to find ways of summarizing that information, so reducing that dimensionality of data. And finally, imputing missing data. And that, again, is about structuring and summarizing information. And then on the final example there, and you'll see that my personal bias towards a more human side of things, that I come from the pharmacovigilance side and now in data analytics and methods. And you'll see probably more sort of real data, clinical trial data side of things, but applicable across different types of data. And that's about expanding insights and things like probabilistic phenotyping. So identifying populations with some sort of commonality, synthetic control arms in clinical trials, clinical prediction modeling, confounding adjustment in real-world evidence, digital endpoints, and heterogeneity of treatment effects. And that's about predicting the probability of events, and that's sort of the core of some of the publications we see in the scientific literature. So from a European Medicines Regulatory Network perspective, there were 3 big regulatory drivers to adopt AI, to leverage AI. On one hand, regulatory submissions, and that is essentially being able to regulate applications of AI in medicines to help create value for public and animal health. Process analytics, and that was about improving efficiency by automating and digitalizing processes. And then healthcare data analytics, and that was about structuring information and increasing insights into data to inform decision making. Now, in the next few slides, I'm going to show what that translates to at EMA. That is a very high-level presentation, so there's a lot more information that I'm not putting here, just to make best use of time. And then at the end, I'll focus on this side of the coin, the healthcare data analytics, which is where I come from, that my perspective as a coordinator of the Health Data Lab. So the setup essentially for innovation, and that's all innovation, not just AI, AI being a tool that you can use to innovate, but it's not the exclusive tool that you can use to innovate. The main necessity on innovation is to create a framework that delivers that innovation, so that where you can have experimentation. And this was created back in 2021 with the establishment of something called the Digital Innovation Lab. And under that lab, there are 2 streams, if you like. There's actually one one or two more that we can add there. But I want to focus your attention on these two because these are the ones that have artificial intelligence in them. The Analytics Center of Excellence that explores analytics, AI, machine learning, robotics to build pragmatic solutions and experiment with new technology. And that is essentially the process analytics that I mentioned early on. And then the Health Data Lab, which I coordinate and is still under pilot. And that is to develop innovative analytics to extract insights from healthcare data and to provide answers and recommendations and maximize intelligence. So that's called the healthcare data analytics side of things. Now, maximizing intelligence means maximizing secondary benefits. So if we develop a tool for one side of the agency, potentially that can be helpful across a different use case, but a similar one. And I think I will show you once we get to the examples how that can be achieved. And to do that, you can't really stray away from having an infrastructure that supports it. And in that respect, we have the information processing and analytics team from our I division that improves the organization's performance through streamlining information processing across the regulatory lifecycle. So jumping to examples, I'll be high level and Laura will go deep into a related example. But high level, I have 4 pivotal examples for you. One critical one for us at this point in time is literature screening. And that does use large language models to identify abstracts or information on the occurrence of adverse reactions. So that literature screening is particularly interesting because it is the signaling that you can get from it in terms of pharmacovigilance is very rare, but when it does happen, it is very important. So it's low frequency, high impact, and that is the sort of thing where scalability measures can benefit the process. Extraction of ADRs from summary product characteristics. So there's a piece of work that uses semi-automated extractions of ADRs from product information. Now, currently we're doing it with the human side. We've started work with the veterinary product information as well, just 2 weeks ago. And we're currently looking at CAPs, and we'll also look at national authorized products for the human side. And that is actually one example where you can have sort of what you could call weak AI, where you don't necessarily need large language models to do a pretty good job. Automated adjudication of ADRs. So if you're coming from a pharmacovigilance perspective, automated adjudication of ADRs is somewhat of a holy grail. So trying to reduce clutter and actually help the reviewers focus on what really matters is critical, particularly in situations of crises. As you can imagine, for the COVID vaccination campaign, there's a lot of demand for validation for work, a lot of reports being made, and we need to find ways of facilitating the work of these signal management leads. And finally, the 4th example is to improve signal detection with previous reviews. Now at EMA, we do have, certainly for human side, we do have about 30,000 reviews of signals. That is a bucket of information that is not been tapped into in terms of value. And we're now initiating that work, trying to understand how we can extract benefits from the work we've done in validating signals for the past 10, 14 years. And then my last slide before I hand over to Laura, I think critically as well, and this is from my experience, we need to maximize value from innovation, and maybe it sounds a little bit less AI focused, but I think we should start from ideas, not from technology. So we don't start with AI you don't start with a hammer looking for something to nail. You start from the ideas, and then the technology is subsequent to that. AI is not the solution for everything. We use an example called the umbrella corollary, which is there's certain technology that still exists and is pretty useful till this day. Umbrellas have been around for 300 years and nobody needs to put AI into them for them to be useful. And that's why we put in that bullet there. Sometimes yesterday's technology is still better. Our approach at the Health Data Lab is simplest solution with greatest impact, not necessarily to shoehorn every possible large language model into a solution. It's important to have a development framework, and we do and follow same technical and ethical requirements we expect from applicants. So you might have seen that we've put out an AI reflection paper at the time that sort of bridged human and veterinary side. There might be specific different requirements from these two sides, but acknowledging that there is an ethical requirement is critical. And an AI system is not the same as a method. So we need to bridge the two. So you might do something that's nice, but if it's not, if you don't really know what it's trying to achieve, it's better back to go to ideation and go back to the drawing board. It's critical to bring everyone along. We probably, all of us here in the room and in the call, have heard how AI might be starting to replace humans. I think it's important to do change management. That involves communication, training, and engagement, share the knowledge, and foster trust in the technology. And finally, collaborate. Obviously, as a network, we collaborate quite frequently and intensely. That may be different for industry, but there will be, even internally, we know of examples where even an internal pharma companies, that sometimes the discussion does not happen between different departments. I think it's critical to engage in safe fora and learn from others and share with others. We will go longer together rather than faster alone. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Luis, for this very nice first half of the presentation, and also for, let's say, setting the scene a little bit of the second half of the presentation that I'm gonna be presenting. That it's on a use case in the veterinary domain, in which we are currently piloting the use of artificial intelligence as a solution of one of our business needs. So, as Paul mentioned at the beginning, and also Luis mentioned in his presentation, artificial intelligence is a very powerful tool. We all know that, and it can help us and assist us in many different tasks and activities, but it might not always be the solution for the need we have in hands. So now I would like to invite you to have this little thinking exercise with me, and imagine that you are, let's say, someone that is working in an office, or it could be here in the AMA, at any competent authority, and it's been tasked to work with a document that, let's say, you need to open the document, understand what's in the document, and extract relevant information from the document. So if you need to work with one document, that is fine, we can all do that. Let's say that instead of one document, you need to work with 2 documents, 3 documents, that it's fine. I think we can all manage that. Let's say that the number keeps increasing and now you need to work with 5 documents, 10 documents, and the number keeps increasing and increasing. And now we're talking about thousands of documents, sometimes even, let's say, around 50,000 products. Documents, sorry. Let's say that at that moment, it is impossible to manage and to cope this workload. And indeed, there's no capacity found to do this. So in this, at this point and in this situation is when AI comes into play. So now that we set a little bit the scene of this use case, and even though I know that most of us are already aware of what the Union Product Database is, I still want to give a little overview of what it means, of what it is, for those that maybe are not so familiar with it. So the Union Product Database, or the UPD, is the single source of information on all authorized veterinary medicines, homeopathics, and other assorted veterinary products, and their availability in the European Union and the European Economic Area. In this database, you can find information about centrally authorized products, nationally authorized products, decentralized procedures. Also, you can find information about mutual recognition procedures and subsequent recognition procedures. And in total, we're talking about more than 46,000 products. And all of these products, they have what is called the summary of product characteristics linked to it, which is a document where you can find all the relevant information about these products. From now on, I'm going to refer to this as the SPC. So it is very crucial to ensure that the data that is in this database it's accurate and has a very high quality, to also ensure the reliability of this database. So how it works at the moment is that the data that is in the SPCs is entered in the database by the different competent authorities. It could be manually or even via an API. But at the moment, there are no checks performed to verify that the information that is in the SPCs and the information that is in UPD are actually aligned. And this is where the pilot, the tool that we've been working on, comes into play, which is an AI-based tool that we've called the SPC Reader. And basically, it's a tool that it's able to extract key data points from the SPCs, from the documents, and convert this data into unstructured, standardized, and machine-readable formats. And in this way, we're able to compare the information we have in the database with the information we extract from the document from the SPCs. But I'm going to go a little bit more into detail in the process itself. And let's say we've divided the whole process in 4 main steps. The first one, it would be to select the document. So we need to understand which documents we want to analyze, or one or more than one documents, and to verify that the type of document we're working with is the appropriate one. In this case, we want PDFs. And also to confirm that these documents are stored in the right place and in the right way. So the tool is actually able to access easily these documents and work with them. So the second step would be to analyze the text from the document. So for this, we really need to have a clear understanding and knowledge of the structure of the document we're working with. So we are able to actually know what we want to get from the document because we understand what's in the document and the structure it follows. And therefore, we're able to instruct the algorithm on what to search for in the document. The third step would be to extract the key data points from the free text that it's in the document. And for this, we need to be able to align the data that we found, that we've extracted from the documents with the, let's say, the structure that is expected. In this case, in this use case, it would be from the structure that it's followed in UPD for the product information, that this is explained in the EU implementation guide for UPD, where the structure is presented. So we need to make sure that both structures are the same. So therefore, we're able to compare them. We also need to understand the relevance of the data that we're extracting, because some of these documents, they have a lot of information and maybe we are not interested in all the information that is there. So again, we need to understand the document we're working with, so we don't use so much resources on extracting data that actually we are later on not going to be using at all. And as I mentioned before, in order to also align both structures that we're going to compare, at some point, maybe we need to also do some modifications in the structure of the data, not in the data itself, of course, but in the structure to make this alignment possible. And as a last step, we need to convert this extracted data into a suitable format. In this case, we're talking about a JSON format, just because if we're talking about UPD, how we actually get the information from UPD is in a JSON format from the portal. So therefore, in this way, we are able to compare both data. But of course, this can be changed and customized depending on the format that it's more suitable for our use case. So now maybe after all these steps to give to have this more in a visual way of, to represent what I was mentioning, what you see here in the screen now is a screenshot of an SPC, part of an SPC, and SPCs are normally way bigger than this, but this is just some sections within the SPC. And you can see that we have different sections like the product name, we have the pharmaceutical form, the target species, and inside each section we have also subsections and different type of information. This is this is what I meant when I was saying that we need to understand the document we're working with and the structure that it follows. So we are able to say, okay, I want to get this section, and inside this section, I want to know this and this that is inside these sections. So after we use the tool, what we actually get is what you're seeing now in the screen, which of course it doesn't look as pretty, but this is what actually the machine understands. This is the same information that you were seeing before in the screenshot of the SPC, but in a JSON format. And you see that the structure is different, but the information is actually the same. So at this point, indeed, we are going to be able to compare the information we get from the database with the one from the SPCs and align them and see whether the information is correct or not. So after this process, and also after us internally piloting the tool itself, we've been able to come into the conclusion that there are many benefits that we extract from this tool, and we've put 4 of them here for you to know. So the first one would be that if we use this tool, as we're mentioning now, for this use case about data quality in the database, of course, we're going to increase the quality of the data, because we're going to be able to eliminate the risk of discrepancies between the information that is in the SPC and the information that is actually entered in UPD. Secondly, by automatizing this process of actually going into the document, opening the document, as I was mentioning before, trying to extract the information that is in there, and especially when you're working with many documents at the same time, it's a big workload. We reduce this very time-consuming process. And additionally, the fact that it's someone, let's say a human being working on this, we also have this fact of us, let's say, typing something wrong or making some errors, or maybe misunderstanding the information that is in the SPCs, and therefore entering incorrect data in the database. In this case, as we are going to have set rules for every SPCs, the data is going to be extracted the same way, and therefore it's going to be entered the same way for all the products. So the third advantage we've seen is that this tool is language agnostic. So not all the SPCs are in English, especially when we talk about NAPs, nationally authorized products. Normally, they are in the official language of the country of authorization. So with this tool, we're able to, again, use the same structure and the same rules. It doesn't matter if the SPC is not in English, and the tool is gonna return the same output and translate it into English. So at the end, what we're gonna get is always the same for each and every SPC. It doesn't matter the language of the document from the origin. And as a last advantage, and as I mentioned before, this output, how we actually get the information from the tool, it's something we can tailor and we can change depending on our specific needs. Therefore, it can be used for many other different use cases. So this is all from my side, but I don't want to finish this presentation without giving a big thank you to someone that was also working a lot last year with this, our ex-colleague Paula, and she did a very great job to make this happen. So yeah, that would be all from my side, and thank you everyone for listening. And I give the floor back to you, Paul.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Raish. And echo the thanks to Paula as well. So thank you for that really in-depth talk. I really appreciate that and took some points myself. We have about a minute for any immediate questions, if there are any. I can't see Slido, if there are any questions. No. Well, let's continue then. Our next speaker is from the AEMPS, Elena Lucas-Roldan. Elena will discuss AEMPS's tools in the regulatory domain. She graduated in pharmacy and holds a master's degree in drug research and development. and completed a specialized course in big data. She gained experience in the pharmaceutical industry across different departments and joined AEMPS 5 years ago. She has served as a scientific assessor in the veterinary department in the area of safety and residues. And recently, she became a member of the Veterinary Big Data Hub. Over to you, Helena.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Paul, for the great presentation. As he said, today I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence in the regulatory domain. Be aware that maybe I speak a bit fast due to time, but I'm sure you can follow me without problem. As you know, artificial intelligence is transforming various industries, including, of course, the pharmaceutical one, and including the regulatory domain. In the European Union, this process of evaluation is really complex. We have to assess medicine, safety, efficacy, and quality. And AI offers the opportunity to streamline this process from automating documents by predicting risk, by enhancing efficiency. However, algorithm transparency or biases or problems still remains. So through this presentation explores the implementation of AI tools in the regulatory domain by giving examples and highlighting its benefits and the challenges it faces, and it's based on my own experience. That's the disclaimer to say that my opinion is only my opinion. Here, before starting with the topic itself, I just put some definitions. I'm not going to explain all of them, just say just some key points. For example, that big data are large data sets. Artificial intelligence is the use of computer systems to perform tasks that usually requires human intelligence. Then we have machine learning, ML, or deep learning, DL, as subfields of artificial intelligence, and a prompt, that are the questions or instructions that we use to interact with artificial intelligence tools. Here is the same, but in a more visual manner. Artificial intelligence is vision, language, generation of contents, and so much more. But it is also machine learning and deep learning, and all of them is based on data. Without data, there's no AI. As I said at the beginning, I want to focus a bit on the implementation of AI in the regulatory world. So I think a quick overview is necessary. Just as we all know, the main regulation in veterinary is Regulation 2019-6. We have different procedures to obtain a marketing authorization in Europe. And in every procedure is involved always a dossier. And this dossier is divided in the different parts: quality, safety, efficacy. We have also data about pharmacovigilance. And we always have the SPC, the leaflet, the product information. And from my point of view, artificial intelligence could be applied to any of the parts of the dossiers. And depending on where, probably the needs would be really different and the requirements. We as agencies are willing to explore the implementation of AI tools in this in the dossier, or in the dossier or in the assessing medicines, but we need the input from industry to know what are their real needs. So today, for the purpose of the presentation, I have divided the tools in two main groups, what I call open tools and local tools. Local tools I will explain later. So focusing in open tools are really known tools that everyone knows, everyone can access. There is always a free version, and you can purchase a license. I would like to remind that with working with confidential information, you have to be really careful. And unless you or your organization have the terms and conditions really clear, it's better not to use that. In my case, I don't use them with confidential information. This is a quick reminder that we have the concept paper of artificial intelligence, as well as the principles of how to use large language models as ChatGPT. Those both documents are on the web, and I just encourage people to read about them. And now I'm going to start with the use cases, with the real examples based on my experience. But before, I would like you to take a few seconds and think or try to name some AI tools apart from the one that were on my previous slide. Maybe you can think about 3, 4, 60, 40. The thing is that there are so many tools that this technology goes really fast. There are a lot of tools under development. And for today, I'm gonna focus just on the tool that I have used, or at least I have tried to use in my daily work. Well, the first use case, I think that nowadays people use AI tools above all to look for information, and that's where I used to use it to search for scientific information. The most used tool is ChatGPT. Because you just ask and you receive a question. However, we have to be very, very careful with the information we receive because AI has hallucinations. That means that from time to time you receive invented information, and you have to be careful with that. And as far as I know, I think that ChatGPT have been forbidden in some organizations and in some countries for professional use. So I would like to give some alternatives to the use of them and other tools that we can use. The first alternatives are these ones. The first one is called Perplexity. It's an AI tool that you just write your prompt and then you obtain an answer, but also a reference. So it's really simple to check where the information comes from because you have the link. And another tool is Claude. It's another a model, and it is general says that it has less hallucinations. And from my experience, I would say that that's true. Indeed, if you see here in the example, I did the ask question to all the AI tools that was to ask for the MRL of amoxicillin. And with ChatGPT, we had an hallucination that was that an MRL on X. And with the other two tools, no. So here we have other tool that I find quite useful. It's called Wise One. It is a Google Chrome extension that you download on your computer. And this one allows you, when you are on the internet, on every web page, you just click the button and you can summarize information from that web page, ask anything about that specific web page, or explore related content, and so on. Here's other tool that calls SciSpace. In this case, I really like this tool. It's a tool that you can use as a web alone, or as a plugin in ChatGPT, or as a Google extension Chrome. As a Google Chrome extension, sorry. Is to look for papers, specifically for papers. You write what you want, and the application gives you the most relevant papers on the topic and related. And from every paper, you get a brief highlight or summary, and you also obtain the link to the paper. And also you can add some other information such as the results or methodology or whatever you want. And the application allows you to chat or talk with the PDF and ask questions on the paper. So for me, it's really, really good. And now for every example I have, or every use case I have in the presentation, I have tested somehow functionality and usefulness and give marks to rate them. And in this case, for example, the use of AI for searching scientific information in terms of functionality goes really well, because you just write what you want and you obtain an answer. Also, you have to be careful. And regarding usefulness, it's a very potent tool, because it's not only for look for information, but it could be also to summarize, to obtain references. The thing is that AI analyzes huge data sets that for me probably would take weeks or months. So it saves a lot of time. And the main challenges I find using these tools is data privacy, of course, hallucinations, and I wonder myself if these tools could be trained while assuring confidentiality, as well how could biases could avoid. Here, there's another use case. In this case, from time to time, as a Part 3 assessor, I have to calculate the upper tolerance limit in order to set up withdrawal periods. It's a statistical parameter, and to do that, I can use R, Python, a calculator, or a hand and a paper. But the thing is that the use of AI is really useful because I write that I want a code. The application gives it to me, and then I go to R or Python and copy the code and try to run it. So now, in terms of functionality, for me, it's a good tool too. Maybe the level of accuracy is not so high because it has frequently mistakes. But however, it explains you the statistical method you are looking for, or if there is something new, the applications tell you what is that. And when you obtain the code, it is explained step by step what is going to happen. And in terms of usefulness, again, it's a very powerful tool because it provides you a base code that it saves a lot of time. And the thing is that it gives you the code while you are writing tests, you are writing in English or in my case in Spanish, and you have a code. And the main challenges, again, is data privacy, that the code doesn't run because from time to time you have the code and then you are really happy, oh, okay. But then you go to R and it's not working and you have to make some changes to make it run. So it's still necessary some knowledge about coding. And depending on the AI, the code differs and also the results. So we have to be very careful with that. Here's other example where I have to try to use AI. In this case was to try to compare an SPC with QRD version 9. I thought maybe it could be a good idea. And I did this, or I tried to do this as an experiment, and I have to tell that the results of that experiment were awful. What I did was took an old SPC, a published SPC version 8, and tried to compare it with QRD version 9, kind of a variation GI 18. And I started a conversation with ChatGPT, and it was impossible to get to a point or to do something useful in this case. As you see, in this case, the marks are really low because it wasn't working. In terms of functionality, the comparison was awful. I tried also to compare an SPC version 9 versus a SPC versus 9 with the same active substance, but not good enough. And maybe my point is that I think this could be done with an application, but not this one. Maybe it could be useful to check titles and subtitles, but not the content. And different queries were working. That, as I said, it was not a good idea. And the main challenges were data privacy. Maybe my prompts weren't good, and so it's better to do the job without AI. And maybe this tool needs specific training to do that, and was the reason it wasn't working. At the end, what the ChatGPT told me was that the SPC wasn't fully adherence to, or wasn't in compliance with QRD, and I was like, yeah, I know, so thank you. Okay, here. There is a completely different example from I had in the previous slide, and I have selected it to think a little out of the box. In this case, is the use of, as a part 3 assessor, I have to identify and classify mutagenic impurities that can arise from medicines. And to do that, there are published guidelines that we use. And I read from the guideline, it is stated that a computational toxicology assessment should be performed using QSAR methodology that predict whatever. And if you continue reading that guideline, it is said 2 QSAR prediction methodology that complement each other should be applied. And if you continue, you read that one of these methodologies should be statistical based. And if you stop to think, what does it mean? Statistical based models try to attempt to link the chemical structure of a molecule with a measured reactivity by using many chemical descriptors as well as machine learning techniques. As if you remember, I said at the beginning, is a kind of AI. The main machine learning techniques are canidis network or vectors or more things. And more recently, we have neural network models that, if I'm not wrong, is a kind of deep learning technique. In a very simple way, we have a molecule, and depending on its substituents, a software can predict the toxicity of it. I like this example because it shows that we are using machine learning and deep learning for a long time. That is a kind of AI, and we are using AI in a very specific case. And I like also because this is a technique, QSAR methodology, that was started by academics in the 60s or 70s, I don't know exactly, and now is used by industry, by regulators, and so on. And now I'm going to move into local tools. That, if you remember, I divided the presentation in open tools and the local tools. Local tools are those that are being developed by member states or authorities or organizations and to run locally. And for me, the main advantage of these tools is that they run locally and is data privacy. You know what is happening in your application, where the information goes, how you can delete or not, and what is happening. We are between member states, we are sharing some application, and we are giving comments and receiving comments to improve them. And I'm almost finishing. Is just to say, or after all the information I have gave you, try to think how AI could be applied in this field or in your daily work. I did the same thinking, but I also thought that I could ask AI what thinks, and that's what I did. And I have chosen some applications that I think are feasible to do in the future. Just for mention, I'm not going to explain all of them. Just for example, imagine in pharmacovigilance, artificial intelligence monitoring real world data in order for signal detection. That could be amazing. I also really liked the example of simulation and modeling. That indeed this year the Nobel Prize has been the Nobel Prize in Chemistry has been awarded to people who develop an AI model. And for PKPD models, or no. The thing is that AI could offers a lot of opportunities, and we have to keep in contact and to try to use them. And finally, just to sum up, just a reflection or a conclusion, that is that artificial intelligence enhances efficiency, accuracy, and strategic planning in preparing a vet marketing dossier. By automating routine tasks or analyzing huge data sets, AI could help us a lot, saving time or whatever. But however, human expertise remains crucial in interpreting data and making decisions, as well as in verifying information, which means that AI is best used as a powerful collaborative tool. And before implementing any kind of new technology, we have to really understand what's behind it. And finally, that permanent contact between industry, authorities, and academy is necessary in order to have better medicines. And that's all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Elena. I found that really an in-depth and thorough talk, and thank you again. I'll just check if there's any immediate reactions. No, there's nothing on Slido, so we'll proceed to the next and final presentation in this session. Our final speaker is Dr. Katrina Sterling from Zoetis. Katrina will share the perspective of industry's use of AI tools in the life cycle of veterinary medicines. Dr. Katrina Sterling graduated from the University of Edinburgh with a degree in virology before doing a PhD in veterinary immunology at the Pirbright Institute, University of Sussex. She then spent 4 years as a postdoc at Pirbright working on DNA vaccines for FMDV and ASFV immunology before joining the UK Veterinary Medicines Directorate. After 2 years at the VMD, she moved to Pfizer Animal Health, now Zoetis, focusing on regulatory affairs. She is currently Director of Regulatory Affairs, focusing on companion animal vaccines and biologicals. She is an expert on immunological and biological product development and registration, as well as the 3 R's aspects of vaccine release. Thank you very much for speaking with us today, Katrina, and over to you.
I'm going to give you some examples of use cases, examples of AI use in the life cycle of veterinary medicines. So, and I work for Zoetis, but here representing Animal Health Europe as the co-chair of the Data and Digital Strategic Group. And interestingly, I put this presentation, I sent it to our internal AI expert, and he ran it through ChatGPT to find out whether I'd done a good job of it. And ChatGPT thought that I'd given a reasonable overview of the different ways in which industry are using AI. I've come at this, I've got 4 different examples from you right across the life cycle of medicine, so very different ways in which we're using AI. All of these are areas in which you as regulators will be exposed to some of what we're doing in some way or other. So, yes, so you'll recognize this a little bit from Diana's slide. So the veterinary industry is very much at the very early stages of exploring the potential of AI. As we've heard from various speakers already, the rapidly expanding use of AI tools, and human health are using AI in medicine's life cycle across various things. And we in the veterinary industry are very much at the beginning of our journey here. There's huge potential. We've heard that right across the board already, but it's baby steps. And our actual use of AI in veterinary medicine's life cycle today is relatively limited. We are using it more and more, but it is still relatively limited, especially in the way in which anything would translate through to something that you would see in a strictly regulatory context. I'll just put this on here just for keeping in mind differences between what is automation versus true generative AI. I won't go through the details, but I wanted to say this because we're using robotic process automation quite a lot now. A lot of the ways in which we're using it in terms of dealing with data, potentially even mechanisms to upload data to the UPD. Whereas true generative AI is something that we're not using quite as much yet, but there is huge potential for the future. We've talked about ChatGPT models, various other models that have just been explained to you. And one of the things that's important in industry, it was touched on in the previous presentation about confidentiality, is what you will see with companies using some of these tools, but creating them in a way that allows us to kind of isolate them on an individual company basis. So, for example, we have an enterprise version of ChatGPT, which allows us to use tools like this and things like Microsoft Copilot, but without compromising confidentiality. So while many of these tools are available publicly, there are also ways in which companies can adapt them to use internally to maintain that confidentiality. And there's huge potential for the use of AI tools in both data analytics and discovery science in the veterinary sector. But it all starts, as we've heard a lot, from having good quality, accurate data. Interoperability of data is important in certain contexts, depending on what you're doing, and understanding the relationship between individual data and wider clinical information is very important. It's been touched on a little bit in terms of different data sources. And one of the things we've started to learn as we've gotten into more data, and it's one of the questions that came up in the chat to the previous presentation, and it's also true with AI, is that A single source of data is not necessarily sufficient to give you confidence in the outcome or the inference, because there is bias in many data sets. But what we find is that the more data sources we use, the higher confidence we can have in that output and the inference, or potentially different AI tools, whether they're telling us the same thing, then you have increasing confidence in what they're telling you. So some examples. So the first one, indications discovery. So this is ways in which you can use AI tools to potentially look for new indications for existing molecules. This is something that's being used in human health. There's a reference at the bottom there. Involves a lot of biomedical data mining. So using AI algorithms to mine huge amounts of data, whether that's scientific literature, clinical trial data, other health records, huge amounts of information. And I think that's one of the key things as we think about what the problem is, why we're looking to use AI, is our ability to interact with and extract information from large data sets. And it gives you data-driven insights that could speed up the process of finding new treatments for disease. Genomics analysis, so we have more and more genetic information, an understanding of that genetic information that allows us to then make inferences. So again, data-driven insights into additional indications. And predictive modeling. We've touched on this. This is using machine learning models to predict which patients are most likely to benefit from treatment, for example, based on medical history, genetic profile, but tailoring treatment. So again, if you think about this in the veterinary sector, we're a long way from this, but it may be something we go into the future, or even potentially understanding ways in which certain patient populations, certain species, certain breeds may, for example, modeling certain adverse events profiles or something like that. Specific example here was the way in which deep learning methods were used to look at drug target interactions in a model called molecular transformer drug target interaction. And it was a way in which they were able to look at existing antivirals and understand whether they would likely have an impact on the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So it was identifying, so rather than companies having to test individual compounds based on what was already known, it was a structural model that allowed a quick screening, which then allowed you to then more quickly identify the molecules that might work. The challenges for using this in veterinary medicine, and that's really where we're at right now, is data. We don't have the same numbers of data sources that we have in veterinary medicine, or they won't be readily accessible. They may be limited to individual company data sets, or they're not organized in a way that makes them readily accessible to do this. Genomics analysis, again, limited data sets. Some companies have broader data sets now, but again, they may not be easily and publicly accessible. Although the more I talk to our data scientists, the more you realize that these sources of public information are bigger than you might actually think they are. And then predictive modeling again. Predictive modeling relies on the previous two. So again, it's relying on data. But these are examples of the power of AI and data analytics and indications discovery. And it's something I think we will start to see in the veterinary sector more and more once we have a better handle on the availability of those data sources. So the next one, switching tack completely, this is something that's much more directly interacting with where you are and we are as regulators, is use in preparing regulatory submissions. So we're exploring ways to make both report writing and dossier preparation more efficient. It's quicker ways to do it, giving colleagues a head start. And this could be true also of a regulator in the context of writing up an assessment report potentially. We like to call it human in the loop. It's generative AI and development. So essentially, you have a protocol or a final report, you have your results and your data and your author, and instead of having to start from scratch and writing up the report or preparing the dossier, the AI tools will do the draft. So the AI tool creates the draft, but the author is still in the loop. The human is always in the loop. So we're not using these tools to replace a person looking at the data, making sure it makes sense, checking it all, the right arguments are there, but it's about making everybody's life easier. And it can improve efficiency and accuracy and reliability. So you're not then having this human transposition of data. It can enhance decision-making. It's more quickly giving you an overview. You've heard this a lot, overview of data, potentially flagging errors, providing additional insights, which is what ChatGPT was trying to do to my presentation, and said whether I ought to do anything differently. Could I make something look better? Had I missed anything? And also there's this consideration of ethical considerations and accountability. I think that's important, particularly when it comes to regulatory decision-making and regulatory submissions, especially if we're talking about pharmacovigilance, is that there's still that human in the loop. We're not taking humans out, there's still human oversight, which is important for accountability, transparency, and adhering to ethical standards. So we're not removing it. We internally, we like to call this process the co-author option. So it's using the AI tools to make our lives easier. Next one again, completely different tact again, and this goes into manufacturing. So we're also looking at use cases in GMP manufacturing. So one of the things you're familiar with manufacturing is we're looking to use it to currently focus on process monitoring and improvement. So it's got the potential to allow us to more quickly modify and identify both issues and process improvements. And we're slowly starting to understand and explore what we can do with this. This one's important also, that there needs to be awareness with our GMP inspectors and our regulators of us using these type of approaches to ensure that there's appropriate guidance, acceptance, and expectations for use of these types of tools, especially in GMP validation context, or if we're using them to support decisions we've made in terms of changing processes. Very simply, everything used to be paper. We've moved to things like electronic batch records, and now much more continuous process verification, and starting to use machine learning for anomaly detection. In the future, where we hope we're going to get to, is things like chatbots and real-time recommendations. So, for example, rather than having data and then having to go back in and look at it, you can get real-time recommendations of what's happening with your process. Is it happening according to the trends expected, or is there something going wrong with it? Potentially allowing earlier intervention in a manufacturing process if something's going wrong. Very simple, continuous process verification and machine learning models. So we have our product testing lab data, our electronic batch records, and the equipment automation data. So multiple different data sources. You've got your historical data, our batch record data, and then, as you can imagine now in manufacturing, we have a lot of extensive continuous monitoring automated equipment. And what you get out of that is trend analysis. And then you can use machine learning for anomaly detection. So, for example, mixed time defects, potency, dissolution. And ultimately, this can give you an alert. But ultimately, there's still a person in the loop here. It's about making that person's life easier, having that continuous monitoring that's going to flag things in real time. So continuous process verification, how do batches look over time, but it's after the fact with hindsight. It's observation batch, and it's often univariate. Whereas real-time anomaly detection is how's that batch performing at the time. Real-time insight, multivariate, much more quicker ability to engage and interact with our production processes. So for finding patterns in data you wouldn't always see, asking it questions, and also potentially identifying things like yield improvement opportunities or recommendation in changing settings. So for example, these kind of things could lead to updates and improvements in regulatory dossiers from a process point of view, or enhanced approaches to quality by design in refining parameters or process parameters. And finally, pharmacovigilance. I think this is the one maybe people have seen the most of so far. So we're starting to look at AI tools for use in human health in pharmacovigilance. So currently in human health, they're focusing on transitioning a PV form to a PV case. But this is not something we typically do in animal health. It's not really the model we work by, where individuals enter cases directly, so there's no kind of interim form. One message from industry on this is that we need to tread carefully and in consultation with regulatory agencies as we explore the potential for use of pharmacovigilance. Obviously, pharmacovigilance is one of those areas where we have legal obligations. It's absolutely critical that we get this right and we're not missing things. And that there's still an expectation of individual case review by a real person. So we have to understand what's going to be possible in the pharmacovigilance space and acceptable, because what's possible is not necessarily going to be something that's going to be completely acceptable. So starting point, it is a long journey, and data analytics and good quality data is our first step. And data visualization, that's one of the things actually you can get a lot from in pharmacovigilance, is just being able to visualize your data in a different way. This will then lead us on to the use of AI to understand and interpret the data and then make inferences or reach conclusions. Currently, too much of the data is unstructured to fully utilize AI tools, and there is differences in both case quality and case completeness that impact use. But in the future, areas of interest could be case processing or case assessment. And I think at the last data forum, we heard an example from Swissmedic where they were using AI tools as initial screening. Signal management, which I'll come on to on the next slide. And then large language models and unstructured narrative data. So for example, large language large language models could potentially be used in ways in which, a little bit like with the SPCs, we can take unstructured data and convert that into structured data that then allows us to more easily run data analytics on it. And this could include things like natural language processing to collect case data, machine learning to apply clinical sign codes to cases, on causality assessment based on predefined criteria. So, for example, I think it was mentioned among the earlier conversations, if you think about the data that may be in practice management systems, vets aren't using standard VEDRA terms. So you can't go into case records in a veterinary context and quite easily pick up VEDRA terms. There could be 20 or 30 different terminology that people would use, even just in English or across different languages, for something that could map down to a single VEDRA term. And that's why this is something that's very early stage, but it's something that's potentially possible in the future. The potential outcome of all of this is higher quality data with a higher rate of consistency of data, which in turn will impact signal management. But this is just a theory right now. We're a long way from actually using this in reality, although it may be something we start to see happen more in a more academic context in mining databases, things like VetCompass or SAVSNet. And I know that they're certainly working towards mining those data sets, taking that unstructured data and being able to analyze it in a more structured way. And signal management. So again, a lot of area for opportunity here in data analytics and summarization, pattern detection, a little bit like the same concept that you see with the GMP manufacturing, and predictive modeling to stimulate and predict which individuals may experience an adverse event. So this is something that may track both to pharmacovigilance data in a retrospective sense, but also potentially going all the way back to discovery and innovation in understanding with a new molecule or a new compound what the risks might be of that product up front. We're also looking at options to use AI to summarize multiple adverse event narratives, apply medically derived logic to categorize cases, identify trends and commonalities among cases, and develop new methodologies for more effective signal detection. So again, trying to reduce the false positive rate. All of this is possible, but it will require close collaboration between the regulators, pharmacovigilance inspectors, as we move in this direction to ensure there's understanding of the process and confidence in both the data and the outcomes and inferences. I mentioned robotic process optimization earlier. It's not fully AI yet, but it is something we're using more and more to perform signal detection runs and apply business logic to identify potential signals. So we're starting to use a lot of this, but it's very much small steps and reviewing all of that and keeping in mind our ethical considerations, our confidence in the use and the outcomes, and always keeping a human in the loop. Finally, there is huge potential across the whole medicine's life cycle. A focus of industry right now is to get better and faster insights into our data. That can then support discovery and innovation, manufacturing, or post-authorization surveillance. And exploring AI tools to make those processes more efficient for colleagues and allow colleagues to do more better. I think that's been our key message with a lot of this. This is not about replacing people, it's about making people more efficient. And AI tools in veterinary medicine can enhance our ability to deliver high quality, safe and efficacious products for animal health and welfare and respond to health emergencies and support One Health. I mentioned COVID earlier. They were utilizing tools like this to allow them to get faster to alternatives, drugs that might work, and then even touching on the real world evidence and real world data post-approval. And I think the final message is just to say that this AI journey, we're just at the beginning, and I think we'll continue to see more of this, do more with it, and it will hopefully enhance our ability to deliver medicines. And I think, Katerina and Paul, that is all I have for you. I'll stop the share.
Thank you so much, Katerina, for that really in-depth and educational talk. We've now had all three of our presentations in this session, so we're going to move on to the panel discussion. We've got some questions on Slido right now. So we'll start with these, but please raise questions on Slido. If you're in the room, we can do it the old-fashioned way of putting up hands. But we'll start off with the first question. So looking at the top, whether the first regulatory submission of AI use was for medicinal products for human use or for veterinary medicinal products development. Luis, Perhaps you'd be able to...
Yeah, it's a great question. From the submissions I was involved in, it was human use. And there's actually quite a few, maybe not a handful yet, but some, and it was for human use. Yeah. That being said, maybe I was not involved in some of the veterinary ones.
No, I appreciate that. And just as a follow-up, I'd be interested when it's like, I guess it's hard to use just a raw percentage of the amount of AI components, but was it in the cases, the subset that you actually saw, was the AI generated content substantial or material?
Not really, no. I mean, it depends on how you classify it. So a lot of this is just really sort of process efficiency stuff. I mean, in my view, so sometimes you're looking at, can you have a computer vision model that reads histology slides and you only need one human reviewer instead of having the traditional two reviewers? So in a sense, it's something that it was already done, and so there's no sort of in terms of the insights, you're not really gaining that much the insights, but we're getting an efficiency benefit. And you can think that from a company perspective, it's sort of a cost-cutting activity, but you can also think that some of these digital endpoints could be ways of accessing populations that are difficult to access because they're in war zones or whatever. And as long as you have some sort of way of transmitting information, using digital endpoints could be a very good way to keep track of these populations. Thanks.
Thank you for that answer. Next one, I think there was actually two questions related to data quality. So we'll start with this one. And I think I'll hand over to Laura. So how do you address data quality when extracting data from the SPC or ePowers?
I'm not quite sure if I'm understanding correctly the question. I guess it goes a little bit on whether we actually assess the data that is in the SPCs, like the data that is in the SPCs, if it's high quality. If that's the question, we don't actually assess the data that is in the SPCs. We take it as it is. We just take the information that is in the SPCs and compare it to the one that it's in UPD, because it should be exactly the same. That's when we talk about data quality. It's more on the database side of it, not on what we actually have in the SPCs. But yeah, you can add. I don't know who asked if that was a proper answer.
Oh no, I think it certainly covered what I was thinking, because if the data quality implies that we have a known good source of information, so we're comparing something against the known good, and potentially that question was, what are we comparing SPCs against? And that's the information in the SPC that's submitted to the EMA versus the data in UPD. Luis, if you had an addition?
Yeah, just one on one of the initiatives we have, which is called Eureka, which is the knowledge extraction, knowledge mining, if you like, entity extraction, knowledge acquisition tool. And it's really about the sort of named entity recognition, identifying adverse drug reactions and removing those. And actually data quality does play a big role there, because whereas for the human sort of SMPC, there is an expectation that reactions are coded in MEDRA, so I assume the equivalent would be VEDRA, but the guideline specifically states for the human SMPC, you should be coding in MEDRA. Now, that doesn't always happen, and sometimes you do have some variations there. So the way we do it is that we have human-in-the-loop review. But that is a very specific setting where you want to create a database that for which you don't have a gold standard, right? So you need to put in some human in the loop in that sense.
Thank you. And the next question is also on data quality. So how do you deal with biased information that actually looks real? Would the use of two independent tools be a pragmatic solution to ensure data quality by comparing their results? Laura?
Well, what we actually well, let's say the use that we actually do of the tool itself is just to extract the data that it's in the SPCs in a faster way. And therefore, I mean, what we try to get and what we understand is that we get exactly the information that we have in the SPCs, and therefore this information is actually compared to the one that it's in UPD. So I don't expect like a lot of biased information getting in the way, but in either way, as I mentioned, that's at the moment it's in a pilot mode, and so if at some point in the whole process we see that there are any kind of biased information getting in, we will try to solve that. But I don't see that happening as it is, let's say, organized or structured by now, the tool.
Thank you, Laura. Moving on to the next question. The FDA created an AI tool that could enable researchers to efficiently identify and analyze safety-related MP labeling changes. And the question is whether the EMA also plans to prepare or share such AI tools for help companies fulfill regulatory obligations. I think that this, I can start with this one, and then I'll open it up to my EMA colleagues in the room. As we've discussed here, that we're looking at the potentiality of the AI domain, definitely the benefits, but also equally the risks and issues of this. So from my side, on the veterinary division, there isn't any plans to prepare such AI tools at this stage. Whether that's a future, in the long future goal, we don't know at this stage. Any other inputs from the panel?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I mostly to agree with you. I think I'm not sure I fully understand the question. I think we're working on internal tools to extract adverse reaction information, which is safety-related information. But the complement to the question is if EMA has plans to do that. I think before we sort of get on doing plans is we need to understand the needs, right? And is that a need to do something? The way we build our tools, they're certainly in the Health Data Lab, we built them open source, so they can be sort of packaged and sort of sent out and rolled out. But then there's a level of expectation. So this is not a sort of a straightforward answer, because is there an expectation that then sort of we maintain those tools, we support those tools and whatever, and what is the needs associated with the tool? So it's an interesting question, but one that is tricky to reply.
Thank you very much. And then I have one question I think might be good for Katrina. So even if there was an AI who could do a process accurately 100% of the time, what task or tasks would you prefer to always be done by a human? I think maybe in response to the human in the loop component of your presentation.
I think as of right now, Paul, I think ultimate decision-making or input into pharmacovigilance signal detection is certainly one of those areas. I think you'd always want to, I don't think it's always sort of one or the other. It's more about, like I said, using AI to make life easier, but maintaining human in the loop. And I think probably also the same would be true of anything to do with the example of regulatory dossier preparation. I don't think, well, we can use the AI tools to make our lives easier. I think we would still want to maintain that human check, that human in the loop, that confirming that everything is right, that there's no errors in it. I think a lot of anything, I guess, that ultimately is going to support a regulatory submission and a regulatory decision, whether that is within the context of a new MA, whether that's in the context of a pharmacovigilance decision, anything right now that is purely regulatory, whereas I think things that are early discovery, directional, I think you're more comfortable with the use of the AI tools. But I think the way in which we're using AI in a medicines context is a little bit different to how it may be used in a other commercial settings because we're a heavily regulated industry for good reason. So I think there is less areas where you wouldn't have a human in the loop at some point. Does that make sense? I think I would struggle with anything where I would be comfortable completely taking humans out the loop and anything right now that relates to regulatory decision making.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Thank you for that. And then looking back at the Slido, the next question at the top, when can we expect guidelines for the use of new approach methodologies? I'm not aware of this methodology. Is there?
3 hours.
Oh, the 3 hours. Thank you.
I guess this is referring to the 3 R's, so new approach methodologies, and on the human side, and the 3 R's working party is working on this. It's not a topic of today's discussion, I would say. Happy to come back to that on our Innovation Day, probably. I think that would be the best opportunity to do so.
Thank you, Eva. Next question. So I think this one's asking is, will EMA and the European NCAs intend to develop or use European developed AI models in the future? Well, I'll speak to that, and please let me know if I've misunderstood your question. It's, as nearly every speaker has mentioned, it's what's the best tool for the job? So we have to define what the job is first. So when it comes to this AI usage, there are multiple considerations when it comes to identifying the best tool. There's data security, governance, control of access to data. Where is the data stored? Is it an open model? Is it a closed model? Is there a RAG component in the model? And the overall direction that we have is to ensure that data is protected at source. There's absolute control over our data, and that basically directs what tools are chosen. That isn't to rule out. So the best tool for the job that met all the requirements would be the one that was chosen. The fact that the majority of the AI tools are developed by US-based companies, I think that's a factor of the tech ecosystem in America is multiple times bigger than in any other country in the world. I think it's also a separate concern of the brain drain of the people who have knowledge and expertise in the space are migrating to America. A separate point, of course, but I think the fact that there's a concentration of tooling in America is a function of that's where the companies are based, that's where they're developed. And that's not to say there isn't a strong and getting stronger European system. There's Mistral, for example, I think it's developed by Facebook employees. I'm just checking that. But it's the right tool for the right job. How and where they're developed in the future, that's a question for the future. I'm not sure if anyone else wants to elaborate. Luis?
Yeah, thank you. I think that applies to generative AI only because we did a lot of models ourselves in our own data, and we actually published on it. So maybe it's not reached yet ChatGPT. I noticed that the question said I've asked ChatGPT and they've provided me information. But the reality is that we do develop our sort of discriminative models on our data, which is the data we can use to provide us the ground truth, right? So only for the generative AI. And even that said, certainly the technology is more on the other side of the Atlantic, but I'm not sure they censor European data. So if they train on European data, you do still have a European dimension in the model.
Yeah, maybe just to say to the audience, because they're listening in, and what I think the background of this question is US-based models. The data then becomes more or less open to access to the US government. When we look at AI currently, we do that in a completely closed environment, and I think Luis can say a bit more about that. So our data are not available to other people. The data that you submit to the agency are not available outside a closed, let's say, network in which we can employ artificial intelligence for analysis. One of those examples is Scientific Explorer, where we look in scientific advices, which is an enhanced search engine, I would say, that can help us in bringing consistency to the scientific advices that we bring. It's totally closed, so nothing gets out of here. So we may use occasionally artificial intelligence that has been developed elsewhere, but it's not like it's being used out there on the open web and with information available for everything. And I think that's a real difference between how artificial intelligence, ChatGPT is. So it has to learn, artificial intelligence has to learn from the data that we already have in the system. There's a clear separation between the outside world and the inside world. Over.
Absolutely agree with that, Ivo. Thank you for that intervention. Looking at the next question, the public's possibly naive perception is that AI will make wonderful new discoveries, but is it in fact going to have more impact on more boring efficiency gains? So I would never characterize anything that's a benefit as boring. The fact, but I absolutely agree with the sentiment. We want to look across the full life cycle, business process, end-to-end flow of what we do, and see where could AI assist, maybe as an individual's change, but not necessarily AI. Could, as Katrina mentioned in her presentation, there's a concept of RPA that's been around for at least 20 years, as far as I know. So it isn't, once again, AI is the solution, tell me the problem. It's what do we want to achieve? What's the best solution? I think that there is the perception that AI will make like wonderful, groundbreaking discoveries. And that's a matter of concern, I think, and something to be addressed as well in how we're going to engage with that. But if I have a tool that could save me 5% of my time across 50 tasks, I would actually welcome that boring efficiency. And I think that would be more impactful. It's something that would be relatable in your daily work. And yeah, it would definitely be an impact. Any other reflections from the panel? Our next question. Online. Oh, online? Katrina, over to you.
I was just going to add to that, Paul. Absolutely, but like you, I wouldn't call efficiency boring. I think I would reflect that those efficiencies allow us to do more and focus on the science. And I think it was one of the examples earlier about reading one paper versus hundreds of papers. It allows us to, yes, it's dealing with the boring stuff, that process stuff, but it allows more focus on the science and the innovation. So it may give us directional insights, but ultimately it's still going to be a person in there. But I mean, from an efficiency point of view, it's massive. I mean, it could take a person days or weeks to read thousands of papers or, trolling through PubMed, whereas the AI can do it in a few seconds and then send you directly into the right place, which means we can do more and innovate faster because we can get better insights from the data. So I fully agree. Yes, that's true that the AI in itself isn't going to make the discoveries, but I think it's going to allow people to do more with the data because it is taking out some of that mundane stuff, the basic stuff that would take a person a long time to do right now. So, those efficiency gains are potentially massive, which is not to be underestimated.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you, Katrina. Moving on to the next question, how do we think the EU AI Act will impact AI use in veterinary medicine sector by both industry and NCAs? So the EU AI Act went live earlier this year. I think we've got a 18 months to 2 year implementation period. It's a very wide and deep document, so I think I can give my answer in part and then look to other colleagues to add to that. I see it as a benefit. It sets out guardrails on the transparency of AI model development. It manages the risks, categorizes AI usage into 4 different risk categories. It mandates a developer sandbox, so AIs have to be sort of demonstrably transparent and explainable. And in a way, I think with these guardrails, it has the potential to increase the quality of AI development. So rather than sort of developing an AI and seeing what works, the guardrails set out in the EU AI Act focus the attention on quality of the model and usage of data. Well, that's my opinion. Anyone interested in adding? Luis?
So just to maybe just the procedural side of things, which is that in the AI work plan we published last year, one of the activities was to assess the impact of, or prepare, if your colleagues prefer, prepare for the implementation of the AI Act. And there's still a lot we don't know, and this is perfectly acceptable. We know that DG Connect, which is formally responsible for the Act, has had a lot of questions, and there's things that we need to tease out. So we still don't know. Certainly there will be some impact, but we still don't know. And I think we need to sort of be courageous enough to realize that we need the Commission to help us interpret some of the elements they included there. Thanks.
Thank you for Luis. I also think it's interesting that of all the AI legislation globally, the EU AI Act is the only one, it's enforceable by law. I believe the others are advisory or recommendatory. And I'm conscious we haven't had any questions in the room yet, so I'll just pause to look around if there's any hands going up. No. What are the most common areas in which AI use is reported to the EMA, whether in clinical trial recruitment or clinical trial control arms? So this is not something I'm aware of, so hand it over to Ivo.
Yeah, you can hand over to me. I think it's a human question, and it sort of links to what I've seen in the chat, is how do you need to inform authorities if and how AI language learning models are, in general, are used in preparing a dossier or even a clinical trial, I would say. In all honesty, I can't remember that we've had this discussion on the veterinary side, because we have not been presented with anything that was being generated with AI. At least if it was, Kat, you must inform me. And then you didn't tell us that you did use it because it's so efficient. And on the it may be clinical trial recruitment. I don't know, Luis, if you have any experience on the human side where it's actually being used in preparing data that are being submitted. On the vet side, I haven't seen it, not yet.
So just to complement, thanks for that. So I think there's there was this qualification procedure for Parkova. I think that was the correct name. I think probably a typo there. That being said, I don't have sort of the statistics in my mind. I know the FDA publishes their statistics and what they've seen. In terms of submissions, we are now setting up an observatory that might generate that statistics and thus help us understand and answer these questions. In terms, sort of broadly speaking, submissions that have AI, in terms of use of LLMs for sort of preparing dossiers or any human side periodic safety update reports. Now, I've been to the International Society of Pharmacovigilance 2 weeks ago, and I've not seen many submissions internally or many industry pointing out that they're doing it, but then in Eyes Up, I had the sense there's quite a lot of people using them. That being said, the AI Act also mentions that some of the uses of AI are for sort of administrative activities, and in the AI Act, it's seen as less concerning, which I guess might be a good hint as to where we'd focus our attention to as well. Thanks.
Thank you. I'd like to pass over to Emma.
Just a comment in relation to that. I know, for example, that EFSA, when they request, for example, some literature review about a new product that is microbially derived or derived from fermentation or something like that, you have to present literature about the absence of antimicrobial resistance genes. And that is generated with large language models because you have to search the literature. Probably in the old times, there was a person going through the NCBI database, reading papers to see if that particular bacterial species contained antimicrobial resistance genes. And now you do that automatically. Still, you need to have the intervention of a person to train the model, to put the correct database, to put the correct query. Otherwise, you will have wrong information. But that I know that is used, for example, for submitting the information for the safety of new products in the EFSA dossiers.
Thank you. It's useful to know. And we also have a comment on screen. Maybe there's a need to socialize efficiency benefits. Not immediately aware what the overall intention is on the comment, but potentially it's basically communicate the benefits of efficiencies.
Yeah,
over to Alistair.
I was putting some questions up on Slido rather than asking them because it seemed unfair to everybody that's in the virtual world behind us. But that was actually a comment that I made following my question about the inverted commas boring efficiency gains. So one of the things we talked about earlier was why is there this hesitancy? Why is some of this reluctance? Where does this trust come from? And I think in some ways, if we were able to inform people, and this is general, not just for the veterinary side of things, about where benefits come from in things that might seem to be less exciting than the things we read on page one of the newspaper. Nevertheless, that might be part of the process by which we generate the trust and the confidence in this as a methodology and not some sort of either wonderful or scary black box that people can't really engage with.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It's you sell the problem and provide the solution. And on that, I think Lara's presentation had a great example of what would you like to do? Deal with one document? Fine. Deal with 50,000 documents? That's impossible. And then providing the solution. And that's an explainable and understandable scenario for everyone. And yeah, it's leading people along on that journey. Definitely agree. And then finally, just one question, and this is related. It was something on Elena's presentation about hallucinations. So last month, there was a paper saying that it's mathematically impossible to remove hallucinations from AI models. It was using the Gogol incompleteness theorem, which I have no idea what it means, but it sounds impressive. But basically, they were saying that the maximum hallucination-free response on an AI model would be 95%. So one of the questions then is, can we ever be confident with AI tools being used in critical processes if we know that every response has a 5% chance of being hallucination?
Is that a rhetorical question, Paul?
Emma?
I can explain you something about that because I have done it. I think the key is your prompt. You have to put very accurate and very well-informed prompts. Otherwise, yes, you are going to have more likelihood of have random information as part of your answer. So I think also when they were talking about which part of the human component is difficult to remove, is this part of training your model to create an answer that is going to be useful and well-informed. That part still, I don't see a computer or done by a database. Still, there is someone who has to double check. Yes, they will provide a lot of information, but still there is someone who has to be, and it's not one person, it's probably a team of people that they are checking the prompt that you use at the beginning.
Yeah, I've actually started seeing quite a lot of prompt engineering courses springing up, like on the major MOOC courses and even in some universities. Because I guess one of the key considerations is repeatability of results, that the same input gets the same output over time.
Maybe on that last topic, I don't think we know what the human error is, but it could be close to 5% as well. If it comes to taking decisions, I would say the answer to that is always use your common sense. Don't just copy paste, and that's what also the clear instructions are. You cannot just copy paste whatever ChatGPT or another AI program generates, and then use it and say, draft me a list of questions for this product based on this information. You don't need the regulators anymore, and then the company uses ChatGPT to say, draft the answers to this list of questions, and then you've got two AI systems working together. So there's a lot about common sense and indeed how we use it. And going back to the initial question is, why do we want to use it? So for me, I would be more than happy if it could generate the efficiency gains and bringing consistency to processes where we can't do it because there's turnover of staff and new experts involved, et cetera, that may not have read all the other documents, which they certainly will not have. And that creates a situation where you can have regulatory inconsistency, and that's nobody wants to have that. So this is certainly an area where I can see artificial intelligence as a tool to bring quality control and quality assurance to the system. Nothing else and nothing more. Over.
Thank you. I think Katrina was first. Over to you, Katrina.
I was just going to add to that, and I agree. And it's a little bit, Paul, like the question you asked me before: is is there something where you would trust just using the AI tools? Because I think it comes down to a risk assessment. It's that risk assessment of in the same way you'd validate anything. What's the false positive rate? What's the risk of error? What's the consistency rate? And I think in most cases we're always going to want or need that human in the loop and anything that we would consider a critical process. But I think it also depends on that context of use and what you're defining as a critical process, and then that risk assessment as to whether you would trust it 100%, because if there's the odd case where it gets it wrong, it's not going to matter, versus something where it does matter. But I agree with what Eva said. I think all of this is about using AI tools as a tool. It's something that helps us do our jobs better, isn't completely replacing people, because I think we're a long way from having that level of trust in the AI tools that we would want to completely take human out of the loop in any of these situations.
Thank you for that intervention. And Luis?
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to do some wordy intervention, but I'll not do that, and I'll just do a plug. So we actually published guiding principles in the responsible use of large language models that tackle the issue of hallucination, and not just the issue of hallucination, but certainly the issue of hallucination. And that's live, that's online. So you actually can go online, you can search it in the EMA website, and you'll see that there's some sensible approaches to that. Broadly speaking, then, when you implement a tool, it's a different world altogether, obviously, and there's needs some quality control, some human in the loop. There are ways of doing that, and there are situations where you probably don't even need that. So, for instance, coding, if you ask a large language model to do a function that adds two numbers, you can very quickly know if it's true or not, right? So, but it's use case dependent, and just again, the plug that we have thought of that and put some sensible, practical solutions or ideas in a document, and that's online, along with sort of a fact sheet or cheat sheet, if you like, that is more actionable, something that's memorable. Thanks.
That's a great intervention. Thank you, Luis. And that document, it's well worth reading. We also have a question on the WebEx. That you'll be unmuted and you can ask your question.
So my name is Bastian Hornung. I'm AI assessor at the Dutch Medicines Agency, and I actually wanted to add to this discussion. On one side, I would want to say, in clinical trials of statistics, we regularly accept that we can have 5% error rate. So why should we not accept it in other areas? On the other hand, you need to see in case ChatGPT creates documentation. Essentially, what is happening is that the tool is creating artificial synthetic data from the data we provide. And it will not be very good in the areas where it hasn't seen a lot of data. Means ChatGPT will not be very reliable for things which we require. On the other hand, we need to see maybe this is an area where we should be as regulators, we should be developing something, because fine-tuned model for exactly this purpose would probably be very beneficial and would be very efficient in some areas and would really have added value. But on the contrary to that, again, there will probably way easier things to do that. As Louis already pointed out, there are very simple things like adding two numbers, which we can do without large language models. And we can probably, if there was a standardized tool, for example, to create SMPCs where you fill in the numbers, which you need to have the right spaces, this would already also be a tremendous efficiency gain without having AI involved. Bottom line, again, AI can be the right tool. If it is the right tool here, that will really depend on the use case, and maybe the error rate can be dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the intervention, and I agree. Actually, the same study which was complaining about the AI hallucination rate went on to document human-based processes with error rates of 17% that were acceptable. So I definitely take your point on having a high-level holistic view over this. So thank you all so much for the questions. It was a really invigorating discussion. It seems to have gone by in a few minutes. I'd really like to thank Katrina, Elena, Laura, and Luis for their insights. I noted a number of interesting themes: the human in the loop, the absolute need for data quality, the need to be a critical thinker when evaluating each step of an AI tool, the concerns around AI usage, but also the benefits. Alistair's intervention about how to advertise the benefits of AI is very worthwhile. And if we can make a 1% change 100 times, that's worthwhile. Before we close the session, I'd like to ask if there's any other reflections in the room. Any other reflections online? No. Well, that's the end of session 2. Thank you again, and I'd now like to hand over to Ivo for closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Paul. And let me start by saying I hope you've enjoyed the day before I come to the conclusion of this year's forum. And secondly, of course, thank all the speakers. You may not have noticed this as a positive development, but 70% of the speakers today were female, which all fits in well. And they did excellent presentations. Rick, I don't want to, say anything bad about the men presenting. But it really, it's one of the targets that was set by our executive director, Emer Cook, to have more female representation in these events. And we all appreciate the time that you've taken and the expert knowledge that you've shared today, and the fact that you were all connected and shared best practices in this forum. I think it benefits us all. And I think we've all picked up some insights from both sessions. Also, of course, I would like to, normally I do this at the end, but this time I would like to do it at the beginning, thank the EMA colleagues that have made this day possible. They're running this annual event and the info days and the other events always, and it went very smooth. So Katarina and Sylvia, yeah, I couldn't see you behind the screen, Sylvia. Always do an excellent job on it. I mentioned at the very beginning of today that in the last 3 years, this forum has covered many topics in the context of the Veterinary Big Data strategy. We had a year devoted on use cases. Today was on on the data and on artificial intelligence, and we try to make this as flexible as possible in order to attract the audience still that they can connect to us. The only one constant, I think, in this domain is the pace of change. When we drafted the strategy, as I said, 3-4 years ago, we did not take into account the rapid developments of artificial intelligence and how that would potentially impact the way that we're doing business. And our continued challenge is to navigate and manage this dynamic and rapidly changing environment to bring the best benefit to the Veterinary Medicines Regulation. We continue to see the evolving technical capabilities and data governance developments, and that includes also AI Act, EDPS, all those acts that are being developed, regulation to control data. And whether we all recognize it's a good thing to control these data, at the same time brings challenges on how we can use those data. But also increased depth and breadth of data availability from stakeholders, adoption of digital sensors, other technology, at-scale digital tooling capabilities, they all bring their own challenges. We've heard about potential barriers today, systems interoperability and lack of standardization, where I saw, at least in the chat, that interoperability was probably more important than harmonization per se, and easier to reach interoperability. And that would indeed be in the spirit of big data, trying to bring different data sets together. And as I said also in the beginning, the Veterinary Big Data strategy is the foundation which provides the framework to navigate these developments and challenges and to align on the objectives that will be prioritized. But I think we also have to recognize that we need to make it a bit more flexible. We need to factor in those technological developments that we've been seeing, which we could not foresee. So what are the recommendations that we take forward? Continue to monitor the evolving data landscape to determine impact and potential benefits to the regulatory system and to its stakeholders. Build the needed capabilities whilst keeping in mind that not all challenges are solved by big data. Some of them will require old-fashioned common sense thinking, I would say. Maintain the use of veterinary big data strategy as a decision-making framework for determining the next focus areas of work and enabling better evidence for medicines development and regulation. Keep ourselves informed of the new legislation, such as EU AI Act, the EU Data Governance Act, and the Interoperable Europe Act, and how best to realize the benefits that arise from these acts. How we better utilize both existing and new data sources to realize use cases and raise awareness and recognition of benefits of veterinary big data, but also, as mentioned before, a bit about expectation management on what AI can bring. And I think that's where we need to, so communication on what we're doing, I think is also essential. And we should bring that not only here, but also to the outside world. Be aware of the impact of AI tooling and build knowledge and expertise in the regulatory network to critically evaluate AI use. From our side, the agency looks forward to engaging with the interested parties and stakeholders on this topic. Today, we had on average a bit over 100 people connected. I do feel that we're making steps each and every year, but I think we're still waiting for the first real breakthrough where we see big data or artificial intelligence really being used in the regulatory processes. And this is the forum where we can discuss it, but we're obviously waiting for the first companies to step forward or for the first regulatory authorities that can say, here, we have found the solution to all our problems. So, but when I look back at the work done since 2022, I am reminded of the statement that progress is never linear. I mean, we need that one thing that will happen. It's not a gradual increase in getting better. I think there will be at some point a leap being made, and whereby we can say this is what we've been working towards, and this is how we really see that it can bring benefits. Having said that, I would like to close the session once again, thanking the presenters, thanking the team that has made it possible, and wish us all a continued success as we move forward with the veterinary big data strategy. And with that, I would like to close the meeting, give you back 1 minute of your time today.